Barcellona from University La Sapienza in Rome, in Italy, is really one of the most known neuroanesthesiologists. His papers, he was the head of subcommittee of neuroanesthesiology in European Society of Anesthesiology, and he's very, very well-known specialist in the field of neuroanesthesia. And our guest from Barcelona, Ricard Valero, is also very known. He's also president of Subcommittee 6 in European Society of Anesthesiology. He has a lot of papers in different journals of our specialty, and for us, of course, a great pleasure to welcome them in our center. And the most important thing that this specialist is very citing authors. I mean, at least Federica have Hirsch index more than 25, maybe more than 200 papers, I don't know. And for us who plan to write something, research, to publish, it's very important that both of our guests is reviewers of leading journals in our specialty, and that's why it's very interesting to know their opinion on the issue, what's the right way to publish the research, how to prepare, how to publish manuscript. So Federico will start. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. We have more participants. If you agree, we will try to make a little bit more interactive. I will tell you something, but I will also ask you something. Okay, because I have to understand how much of English you speak, which are your ideas, how would you move. Okay, I will tell you something. I will tell you what I know, but it's useful if I can do something for you. So trying to work, let's say, with each one of you. And on top of this, you decided to take my chair. It's okay. It's okay. No problem. I'm not sure. And beside this trying to make it a little bit interactive, what I want to tell you, you know my email address. Most of you received an email recently. Yes? You too. I mean, the one that were registered received an email with some materials, you know, a link to a video. So you know my address. For those that do not have my email address, you can ask to Professor Zlotnik. What I would like to do is to build a net of contact so we can work together. Okay, if you are interested for whatever reason in writing, you can do it by yourself. But if you work with someone else that already knows it, it's like to learn anesthesia. You can do it by yourself. But if you rely on the support, on the assistance, on the teaching of someone that knows how to do it, things will work better and probably safer. Writing is the same. The point is that writing in medicine is not exactly the same as practice in medicine. You might be an excellent doctor and not being good in writing, because writing is a different and dedicated competence. You know, it's like you can be a good neonatologist but not a good anesthesiologist. Or you can be a good anesthesiologist and a good neonatologist if you have done adequate training in this. Okay, so the fact that you are a good doctor doesn't necessarily imply immediately that you are a good writer. There are some rules, some tricks, some competences, a way of thinking. I will tell you another important thing. I have been teacher for many, many years in the course of scientific writing at Albert Einstein University in New York, okay? This was a 2-year course where 10 teachers and professors ran a class of about 20 colleagues, young colleagues that already completed the course and are part of the staff. So not young, but 28, 30, 35. Okay. Of course, when I entered this room, I was the one with the most weak English. They were all better than me in English, but I was better than them in writing. What I want to say is that English is important, but it's not the most important. You can learn how to write even if your English is so-so. This is especially interesting for you because you are not native English, not because you are bad, but not native English. So English is a relative problem. Of course, you have to be somehow confident in English. Now, the next question is, why do we want to write? And this I would like to know from few of you. You have any idea why we want to write? And you? Is there anyone that knows why they want to write a paper? Becoming famous, rich, and well-known?
Rich.
Rich? No,
Rich.
No, we have to share our experience.
To share. You want to write to share your experience. I think you have to be more ambitious, you know. Writing is a very rewarding activity. You will see your paper written black and white on a international journal, and eventually in time you might be the expert in the field. Because we were talking about this with him, you know, when he has a clinical problem, he does, as for what I understood, if I'm wrong, you can correct me, he does a literature search in English, correct? So if you have a clinical question, is it true that you do your search, you do it in English?
Yes.
Yes. For instance, last research you have done on clinical topic in English. Have you searched something? Intubation, difficult intubation. Can't say. Have you done something?
Pediatric analgesia.
Pediatric analgesia. And you did it in English.
Yeah.
Also in English eventually, also in Russian, but also in English. So this is why we need to publish in English, because even in China, even in Russia, even in South America, when you have a clinical problem, English is the language of sciences. I'm Italian. I was born in Italy. My first language is Italian. But when I have to get in touch with you, I make it in English. So this is probably clear, but we have been talking a little bit about this. I think that is especially important, and I think it's especially important in Russia, because I heard that for many years Russian and Americans were fighting. No? Not really fighting, but not on the same side. So I understand that eventually, especially here, but it's also in Italy, we have the most beautiful language in the world. We have the language of the opera, and we have to write in English, It doesn't make sense. Still, I learned to write in English. Okay, so to have a paper, a published paper in English is different than to have a published paper in Italian or a published paper in Russian. Because when you search pediatric analgesia and you do it in English, everybody can read it. Okay, so it's not exactly the same. We have to try to challenge ourselves and to make it, if possible, in English. Still, the method, the methodological approach I will present on writing works in whatever language you write. My suggestion is to try to head for an international and peer-reviewed journal, because this will provide access to people that eventually search for the same topic. Another question. What would you like to learn today?
I'd like to understand how write an articles and how to make.
But there is something special that you would like to learn?
I don't think so. I just want to understand something about
Okay.
maybe then.
The organization at large. And you, is there something special that you would like to know?
Well, I would like to learn, like, how's the protocol
Mm.
to start writing, because for me, it's very difficult. I can have the idea, but it's very difficult to organize.
Okay.
So I would like to learn how's the protocol that we have to follow up.
This is
So we
similar
can
to what
start-
she said, but he explained it a little bit more specific way. You say the same things, but he said in a more, because we have been already talking with him last year, you know, so he knows a little bit about me, and he pretends a little bit more. So this is a good point. Sometimes we have an idea, and what I think is simple idea are the best ideas. You know, we will see. I'll show you in this first part of the presentation that once it came to me a very simple idea, and then how did I manage about this? What are we going to do today? I will present for about 20 minutes or so a general review on what is the scientific papers, which kind of scientific papers we can write, and which are the sections in a scientific paper. And we'll talk a little bit on each single section, how to organize, how to develop. Then Riccardo will present some of his experience. Then Anastasia Borozdina, Sasha mentioned that Anastasia is Russian, because Borozdina is a typical Russian name. But we met a few years ago, 5, 6 years ago.
7 years ago.
7 years ago, so she grows as a beautiful lady, I become older and older. And in these 7 years, we published three papers. 10 papers, okay. 10 papers we published. One are the guidelines on postoperative delirium of the European Society that I have called Anastasia to participate in. This is interesting, and she will present a little bit of our partnership and how she does, because with a lot of work, because the poor Anastasia has been bent to work like a mule, you know. There were times, and she had 2 kids in the last years, and still sometimes I write to her an email, and she knows I want the work done. Correct? And when I say done, I mean done excellent, in an excellent way. Okay? So if you do as she did it, you might have 10 papers in the next 7 years. There is someone outside. Eventually, she's not interested, Sasha.
I will take it.
By force. Okay, so she will bring specific examples of what we did and hopefully how our cooperation ran over the last 7 years. So again, I look forward to the time when you will write to me and say, I would like to prepare a study on this topic, and I will be happy to help. If you write to me, please keep the email short, 6-7 lines. Do not expect me to reply immediately. Sometimes I do. If I can, I reply within 48 hours. If I cannot, write me again. After 2 weeks, you write me again. Sorry to bother you, but I haven't received, and I try to get back to you, okay? And then after that, after anesthesia, I will get back on the screen, on the scene, with 2 examples of writing of my papers, and now those papers have been edited. So kind of practical examples. If it's possible, I would like you, each one of you, to come out with an idea and do a little exercise. But you have to be a little bit more proactive, not passive. If you are passive, then it's difficult to bring you in the fight, Okay. This is the course. You like the symbol of the Burdenka section. These are the type of scientific papers we can publish. Is there a light here?
I thought the screen really doesn't work.
Fantastic. So I signed it. I made it in 3 major categories. Original studies, non-original studies, and short communication. Original studies are those kind of studies where you bring in a new information. The prototype of these studies is the randomized clinical trials. Do you know what is a randomized clinical trial?
No.
She. So that's why I asked her.
Randomized clinical trials?
Yeah.
So it's several clinical trials that study something and compare it with another thing in several centers if it's multi-central.
Okay, this is a short way. I think that the critical point of a randomized clinical studies is that you have a treatment, new treatment, for instance, A, that can be compared against the standard of care. Some standard of care, even saline, should be administered. You cannot compare something to nothing, but always to something else. And patients are randomized to treatment A or treatment B. This is the point. So it's a random sequence. You don't know if when you enroll this patient, he will receive treatment A or treatment B. Mm-hmm. And can be multi-center, not necessarily, but can be multi-center. And this is, we will see it a little bit more in detail. It's the most relevant, most important kind of new scientific information we can eventually. We will see that it's not always necessarily true, but this is the standard. Then prospective or retrospective observational studies. So I have a series I start tomorrow, and I want to say how many patients will have hemoglobin drops in my clinical practice in brain surgery. And I record all the patients that have hemoglobin that at the end of the procedure above 10 or below 10. And then I start to try to understand why. Patients that start with a low hemoglobin will more often have anemia at the end. Patients that have more bleeding and this and this and that. This is a perspective. Or I can go to the chart and say, let's see in the last 3 years how many patients had hemoglobin below 10 or above 10 at the end of the procedure, and see which are the variables possibly associated to this result. Okay? Case series. I found an interesting case of a patient that had familiar congenital coagulation disorder, and ended up in clinical craniotomy with anemia, and so I described it. Or case series, I had 5 patients that ended up the craniotomy having hemoglobin less than 10 grams, and then I reported Okay, new data, new information, non-original studies. Non-original does not mean that do not provide known information, but it might be that revisited or explains in a different way available information. So narrative review is, I'm an expert, I think that there are 10 papers that are critical to understand the risk of postoperative anemia, you know, blood hemoglobin below 10 after craniotomy, and I say to my readers, listen, to me these 10 papers are the most important. And I say, paper 1 say this and that, paper 2 say this and that, paper 3. It's a subjective selection. I am the expert, I select the papers that I consider most relevant. This is a very tricky kind of paper, because being myself the expert, I can be wrong, or I want to address your attention to one way or another, and saying, for instance, use this device, and in my 10 papers, selected 10 papers, 3 of them report a certain therapy or certain monitoring approach. Understand? So narrative reviews are very sensitive. I can manipulate because I'm an established authority in the field, and I can select the information that I want to provide you. So either you are a reader of a narrative review, or you have the ambition to write a narrative review. Me personally, will look at this paper with a very skeptical attitude. Understand? Systematic review and eventually a meta-analysis. With a systematic review, when I write a system, because I see you squeezing your eyes. With a systematic review, what I say to my colleagues when they take the initiative of writing a systematic review, did you wrote a systematic review? Yes. We went immediately into original papers. Systematic review has a background agreement between the authors and the readers. So you take a responsibility toward your readers. And the responsibility, which one might be this responsibility? Do you have any idea? Someone has an idea, which is the specific agreement that you sign when you do a systematic review. No, it's okay, I'll tell you, I'm here.
Conflict of interest?
Not necessarily. You might even have a conflict of interest and still run an excellent systematic review. The agreement that you take is that on this topic, on this specific issue, I will tell you all what is known, everything, what I like, what I dislike, what I explain, what I cannot explain. In my systematic review on this topic, pediatric analgesia, there will be everything, you know? If I don't like acupuncture, but acupuncture has been studied, I will report it. Understand? So when you do the literature search, and for literature search selection criteria that you might specify, you should specify. We will see. We will talk in some detail on it's kind of the work we did at the Anastasia for the ESA guidelines. You know, when we wrote the ESA guidelines, we had the intent to write on postoperative delirium, and then we screened all the literature. Whoever published on clinical postoperative delirium went under evaluation. If the paper was methodologically acceptable, should be mentioned in your systematic review. You cannot say, I'm not going to talk about this. Understand? Even if you don't like. And this is important. if out of a systematic review there is one single endpoint that you want to evaluate, again, which is the relevance of preoperative coagulation on the risk of postoperative anemia. I haven't made a study like this, it's just an example, you know. Then you have, you know, two exclusive variables, and then you can make a forest plot and say, in the study number 1, it weighed in a positive way. In the study number 2, we will see that what is a forest plot. Have you ever seen a forest plot? Yes, you know. You know, so you have. So a systematic review might, if you can select, or if you decide to select one single variable, lead into a meta-analysis. I am not able to do the calculation by myself, but there are some colleagues that does. Then, among non-original studies, we also have editorials. You know, I am an expert, and I want to tell you there is something important in your life that I want to remind you is important to evaluate and to see preoperative coagulation and preoperative hemoglobin value, because sometimes patients ends up at the end of the procedure that are anemic. This is an editorial or a commentary. There is a paper published on this topic, and they write to me, the journal writes to me and says, "Dear Professor Pilota, since you're an expert, can you write a commentary on this paper?" And I read the paper and I say, what I gotta say, it comes an idea to my mind, and I write it down, and this is a commentary. Then you have also short communication. These are the way how young people generally start their publication career, that is writing an abstract, possibly to a congress that leads to a poster presentation, you know, 200, 400, 500 words, that has exactly the same structure of a full paper. So ideally, every abstract can result into a full paper or a letter to the editor. We will also see a little bit about what is a letter to the editor, that basically can be a comment to a previously published paper or carry new short information. Is it all clear so long? Do you have a question? No. You had a question? No questions? Please make an effort, come out with the questions. I'm sure there is something not clear. You know, I'm sure I can do better than this. I'm sure you are more curious. Okay, this is the explanation I already reported on this randomized clinical trial, interventional studies. So we have to test something, you know, to do either approach A or approach B, in which data are collected prospectively. So we start tomorrow. We cannot go back. Okay, randomized is necessarily prospective, to evaluate two interventions. One is the control group. Control might be saline, might be the standard of care, might be whatever, but random assignment. This is very important. I haven't mentioned in my slides, but we know, and I want to remember, it's very important, the ethic committee approval. Ethic committee approval is fundamental for any publication, you know. I reviewed papers that had not from Russia, that had not a support of an ethical committee, so still happens. This is crazy. When you report data into a paper, even without the name of the patient, but just data, you know, her blood pressure, his blood pressure, and blood pressure, you end up into a publication, you have to obtain the ethical committee approval. Clear? Do not forget this, because it's very important. Prospective observational study, non-interventional study, so you see how it goes. You see how it goes in your standard practice. Understand? you record the hemoglobin at the end of the procedure. If you want, you can make a threshold value, so how many patients are above, how many below, or a continuous description, you know, how many are this way and which is the line or the curve that you design. The endpoint might be one or more. Of course, you can record the hemoglobin and temperature, hemoglobin and renal function, and so on and so on. Should be tested having an appropriate sample sizing. We will go a little bit into sample sizing. As you can imagine, now I will tell you a little bit more on who am I, but sample sizing is critical. If you expect, if you expect your paper to be published, and we are talking about an original paper, so really a new piece of information, even if it's a prospective observation, even a retrospective that I consider the weaker, you know, randomized clinical trial, prospective, retrospective. Retrospective is low quality, low level of relevance, you know. Calculate a sample size. There is a long way to how to calculate the sample size. I don't think we are going to go into this today, but when we calculate the sample size, we have to say, I want to understand if patients that will have hemoglobin below 10 at the end of the procedure, this event is associated with renal function. The point is that I have to establish for which level of renal dysfunction I assume that there is a correlation. These are just examples, you know. I don't even know if I'm making, yes, I do, because renal function and hemoglobin production are correlated, but this is not necessary, okay? I want to say, if renal function is impaired at least by 30%, okay, what I want to say is that when I think, me as an author, I think of proving or verifying a difference or a connection, consider if what you are trying to prove has, beside the statistical relevance, a clinical relevance. Because a 5% difference in renal function has no difference, has no impact in clinical practice. Am I clear? So consider not only the numbers. Preclinical scientists often get surprised by their numbers. You know, a lot of rats do this and the renal function goes this way, and I discovered that the number is P below 5.005. So it's true. Then you read it. Who cares? Who cares to know if there is 2% difference in renal function between my patient A and my patient B? Understand what I'm saying? Go back to your clinical practice and ask yourself, is this information eventually clinically relevant? Because we know that 2% generally doesn't make a difference. In mortality, might make a difference. You know, if you have 2% in mortality, is a huge difference. But 2% in hemoglobin concentration, 2% in sodium concentration won't make a difference. So ask yourself, what am I working on? Makes sense, makes a relevance, is interesting for my colleagues. Ask me, you write me a message and you say, I'm searching this, you think it's worked? Okay, because the fact that you are also a doctor is very important when you do this. Okay? I'm famous because I do clinical research. It's stupid. It's very stupid, but what has been discovered in huge preclinical research in the US is that not always what you find in rats is true in humans. So our clinical experience is very important when you do this. These two activities should come together. You should not have the dress of the scientist and the dress of the doctor. You should bring these two parts of your experience together. Okay? Retrospective observation, as we said, we go through the charts and we see what have we done in the last 2 days, in 2 years, or last 200 cases of this specific type of procedure. Case series, we mentioned, rare or unique individual cases or series. Non-original studies, this is the forest plot I mentioned, This study mentioned no difference, this favor and this favor, okay? And then you produce, this is a meta-analysis, how certain variables impact on another one. It impacts in a favorable way, unfavorable way, neutral way, then you calculate and then you have. So narrative review, we said, usually written by expert. This usually means that the stronger you become, the easier will be the chance to publish. We will see a little bit about this, but even if you're very good, even if you're a very nice person, if you start writing the Bible, they won't trust you. Understand? So start with saving Lazarus. You start saving Lazarus, someone else will write it for you, and you will become famous. So start by the fact, what I'm saying. Start with the miracles, and then afterwards you will write. Don't start writing and then do the miracles afterwards. Okay? So narrative review, we say, very tricky. Systematic, this is easier, even for a beginner. I suggest to go along an experienced person. Come along with me and ask for support, or go with someone else that you have in touch with or esteem. Meta-analysis, as described by this statistician, statistical analysis that combines or integrates the results of several independent clinical trials. We said that. And the forest plot is the form of producing a meta-analysis. There is another little information that I would like to share with you. We will see when we reach the methods, how to write a method, how to design the method of your study. The systematic review has a method section. You have to say, I will include all the papers, I will include papers only in adult patients. It's a difference. I will include only clinical trials, I will include clinical and preclinical studies. You have to decide, you have to make your point and try to understand always on the clinical criteria. So again, the double dress that you wear, the scientist and the doctor should come together and design and define the details of your methodological section. When you write a method, it's not necessary to reinvent the wheel. The wheel has been invented. So you might invent the car, or the truck, or something else. Use whatever is available and build having the previous man experience. As Newton said, even if we are a dwarf, we will have a larger view if we can stand on the shoulder of our ancestors. You know this? Ever you heard this? Understand what I'm saying? Even if you are a dwarf, if you stand on the shoulder of your ancestors, you will see more far. To sit on the shoulder of your ancestors means to know what they have done, how they have done. And the method section is the key point of learning how those that came before studied a certain point. how they studied neurocritical care, how they studied anesthesia, how they studied awakening, how they studied fluid therapy. Okay, so often a systematic review can be the starting point for a cluster of research. I want to know how to manage fluid therapy intraoperatively. And then you learn how it has been studied, which were the results, impact on coagulation, impact on electrolytes, impact on hemoglobin, and then you say, okay, basing on what is available, I can add something here, you know? Because when you do a systematic review, you realize what is already known, but also where there is the lack of information. And so it's not only that you come with a new idea that is important, but also if this idea fits an empty room, an empty space. Understand what I'm saying? Because it's not enough to have an idea, but also it's important to demonstrate or not to demonstrate this idea with a method that is appropriate for fluid therapy. No, how fluid therapy has been studied over time. Fluid therapy probably has not been studied as difficult intubation. Completely different approach, you know. Intubation, increase in CO2. Fluid therapy, impact on coagulation. Understand? So a systematic review can provide you the methods, all the methods, impact on electrolytes, impact on cardiac output, impact on coagulation, and can provide you the frame of empty and full information or controversial information. You know, we don't know if colloids therapy are safe. Then I want to go into this, or I don't want to go into this. You decide, but first you have to know what happened before. And you have to know it, not randomly. You have to be sure that you know 99% of what has been published in this field. It's a commitment, no? I study many hours every day. Okay, I spend every day many hours studying. And I have my young colleagues, I assign them a topic, and I say, refer to me on this topic. And I'm very strict. And do you know about this? I don't tell them. But I go through and I check what I found and what they found. So this is the other point. We understood about the relevance of a systematic review and how systematic review can facilitate a cluster of publication, you know? So you can generate a retrospective, a prospective, a randomized, and a review. Only for a single topic. Just for a single topic, immediately, after months of work, not immediately, after months of tight work, after challenging yourself with your colleagues, one or two of them, so you are three of you working on the same topic. But then you have a full picture of how this specific sedation in neuro anesthesia, what is known, what is not known, how it has been measured, which variables have been brought into the field. You know, time of awakening, mortality, impact of the respiratory drive, understand? So now we know how it's important to run a systematic review and how it works both for the methodological part and for the study design. What I want to say on this whole picture, scientific writing and science is not the place for being too sensitive or being offended or feel to be offended and stuff like this. You know, you have to be serious, you have to respect people that work with you, But when you are very young, you may go through literature search, you read all the paper, and you sit with me, you are as important as me. This is not a year at this point. We are two persons, and we face together problem. I do my question, you do your question, you try to challenge me. Be very open. You know, not sensitive, not say you don't respect me. You don't respect me if you don't make me the question. Understand? If you challenge me, you respect me. I don't want to go outside and say I forgot my pants and nobody said me. Okay, and someone say that the king is naked. Okay? So when you sit and you are serious, challenge me, and I will respect you. Because this is the basis. Of course, I have more experience in going through a paper, but still I might have missed an information. So you have to come out and say, this is important, and this is part of the mentality, and this is why a group makes a difference. It's very difficult to be a single writer. You know, in a hospital, you are the only one that writes. This is very, very difficult. It's possible because luckily we have internet and the horses and the seagulls, so you can send me a message. But of course, when I became professor at Yale University, I took a lecture, 45 minutes of a single topic. I've been talking about craniotomy, and there were 150 colleagues listening to me, the whole anesthesia part. Some of them are very expert in coagulation. Some of them are very expert in intubation. Some of them are very expert in anemia. Some of them are very expert in oxygen. And so when you face a qualified audience, a qualified interaction, then you will be good. But if you are alone, your way will be long and very steep, It's important to be a group because you bring together the mentality, you bring together your experience. So, if you are together, it's better. This is known, but in this case, in scientific writing, it's especially important. If you are alone, you might be the first one of a group, and so someone has to do it. Here we go, the level of evidence. We now know that according to evidence-based medicine, there are levels of evidence. So when we have a level 1, this is something that should be done, correct? And this is probably not that surprisingly at this point, goes along or comes along with the type of papers that we have seen. You see, clinical guidelines we made with Anastasia, meta-analysis and systematic review, they all goes along with multiple, not single, but multiple randomized clinical trial into level 1 evidence. It means that when this comes out, certain information comes out of this level of evidence, then it should be done. It's interesting because I work in neuro. Do you work in neuro? What do you do? Say it in Russian. Specialization. Anesthesia. So you are in the specialization school? No. Finished anesthesia? Not finished. So in the school of specialization. Correct? Yes. Okay. I do neuroanesthesia. This is probably why I'm here at the board. 25 or 30 years ago, when I started doing neuroanesthesia in treating aneurysm patients, we had the triple H therapy. We had the triple H therapy, you know. We all, the good one, the neuroanesthesiologists were, you know, better than the other, better than the non-neuroanesthesiologists because we're able to do the triple H therapy. Hemodilution, hypervolemia, hypertension. So when you had a patient with subarachnoid hemorrhage due to cerebral aneurysm, then you start pushing in a lot of water, you keep arterial blood pressure high, and you dilute their hemoglobin content. And this made us different and eventually better. In time, some of these prescription were challenged. And 2 years ago, I have done a review, and this, I'm not sure if this was a systematic, but actually yes. And I reviewed what is actually known about the treatment of aneurysm subarachnoid hemorrhage. We know that hypervolemia kills the patient. We know that hemodilution kills the patient. And we know that hypertension only in patients that have a symptomatic, clinically symptomatic, not the transcranial Doppler, a clinically symptomatic patient might be partially beneficial. So after 20 years, 25 years, we came to know that what was the law of 30 years ago were against our patient, because these principles were generated 30 years ago by a group of experts that seated around the table, like Valer, Ivan, and me, and said, how do we want to treat subarachnoid hemorrhage? He says hemodilution, he says hypertension, and I say hypervolemia. It was not true. And for 30 years, no one seated on a table and said, did I say a lie or a bullshit? It's interesting, no? A very simple and very shared, everybody did it. You were the neuroanesthesiologist, you have the rank of neuroanesthesiologist, and they would not even talk to you. You know, because you were the neuroanesthesiologist doing something that kills the patient. So this level of evidence is important. It's not something that is just between me and you. Level of evidence is built on clinical evidence and should run our clinical practice. Okay, and this is why it's beautiful to contribute to the science, especially in English, because everybody can read it. Because if you do it in Russian or in Chinese and I cannot read it, it's useless. You see, it's exactly what we have seen. Animal studies. We will see more. Now, the United States have been, you know, ahead of the world running preclinical science. They learned that preclinical science doesn't always necessarily apply to humans, because human systems are more complex and not as simply, you know, direct and controlled like in animals. And so they invented what is called now transitional research. And this is why they told me, because transitional needs that you have also to know the patients. And this is why when you do practice, is an advantage. I work with my patients. I work many, many, many hours with patients. And when I work, I also study. Because before I were going to the operating room with a lot of sheets in my pocket, you know, with a published paper and reading. Now, of course, you have the computer, the internet, the mobile. You can read hours. I don't know how fast are your surgeons, but I always have many hours for reading every day. And I read science. Interesting. You've been to my place, no? I do this way. I read many hours every day. Okay, then there is, as always in life, a ranking. Ranking applies to journals and to scientists. A way of ranking a journal is to measure the impact factor. Do you know what is an impact factor? Someone knows what? Have you heard about impact factor?
Sure.
Oh, okay, at least. Thank you. It's the first positive answer I received today. You have an idea what is an impact factor?
How high quality journal it is, and the higher factors are better.
You know which is the most qualified, the highest?
JAMA.
JAMA is very high.
New England Journal of Medicine.
New England Journal of Medicine, they are all very, very high. Yeah, I think that the science is the highest that also reported, but New England is the highest in clinical. And JAMA comes a little bit after. And the Lancet after New England is the Lancet, is the second one. So the impact factor is calculated by a ratio of published paper per year and number of citation of this journal per year. There is not a way of writing, but you understood what I'm saying. If a certain journal published 100 papers every year and has been cited 100 times, the ratio is 1, impact factor is 1. Easy, no? Because of course, if you are able as journal to select very few papers, but these few papers are cited many times, it means that the journal does an excellent job. Select good papers. Is clear? Sometimes I'm not very good in
I don't
mathematics.
think there's a clear correlation with it. I think if it's a good journal, it will have an impact factor not due to the collection of right papers, but mostly on the name and the brand of the particular journal.
Yeah, this
Now
is true.
it's-
This is true. But originally,
Originally, yes.
this is the
many years
mechanism.
ago.
Many years ago. But originally, this is the mechanism. So, a journal that published many papers is at risk of having a low impact factor. Actually, the New England Journal of Medicine every week publishes only 2 or 3 original studies. You know, so they over time they shrink. So they moved from being a monthly publication to a weekly publication, but they shrink from having 6 or 7 original papers every issue, 1 monthly, to 2 or 3 every week. So they've been, very smart in keeping this balance. Every journal pays, every editorial board, we will see, pays attention to how this impact factor goes. And the impact factor is, of course, an amazing journal, plays at another level. But they can go down. And the Lancet is immediately there to say, I'm going up. Okay, so there is a struggle to this. Also, a scientist can be weighted, or generally weighted. There are 2 major way of weight a scientist. One is the citation index, so how many times you have been cited and in which journal have you published. So if you have 100 or 10 publications and each one is in a journal that has 10 of impact factor, you have 100 of impact factor. It's the sum of the journals where you have published, or the times you have been cited, or this Hirsch factor, H index, that is how many times each of your papers, most cited papers, have been cited. It means that if you have 20, you have at least 20 papers cited 20 times. When you have 28, you have 28 papers published at least 28 times. It's very difficult to go from 28 to 29. Understand, when you are above 40, I'm not above 40, you are in the Hall of Fame of the scientists. Okay, and so we have made, this is, who am I? Sasha told you. Now we have about 180 manuscripts. Last year about 26. This year 19. 60 as first author, 70 as last. Last is the senior. You know, when you coordinate a group or promote a research and you are the one that does nothing except correct someone else's mistakes, then you are the last author. Say it again. Reviewer. This is very important. You know, in time when you become, I'm not saying famous, but known in scientific writing, clinical research journal might ask you to participate to the review process. And so you become aware of what happens in the world. You know, anesthesiology, if as a neuro paper, writes to me and say, do you think it's a good paper? And I read it and I make a score. And so I learn how to be a better member of the editorial journal. Means that there is a group of scientists, eventually one in neuro, one in obstetric, one in intensive care, and so on, that says I participate into this journal, anesthesia and analgesia, and we decide how many papers we should publish, are we going better or worse, and so on. And of course, then in time you become chief section editor, so for anesthesia and analgesia, all the papers in neuro comes through me. Or academic editor for anesthesia and analgesia, or for instance, or cardiology, or so on. This is the take-home message, THM, take-home message for this first section of my lecture. We still have a lot of time to go. This, in each THM section, I will joke because I brought a sentence of myself. I cite myself, you know, and this is a self-citation. A successful study is a published study. Understand? I don't play the ball just to make nice move in the middle of the field. I play the ball to do goal. Period. Understand? I'm not there to write a nice sentence and think and understand. Yes, but at the end, we want to bring this paper into a journal and be published. This should be your obsession. If you have this obsession, you might succeed. If you just, you know, get in love with yourself, you stay in the middle of the field, the other team will win, not you. Understand? So successful studies are published studies. Unpublished studies, I don't know. How do I do it? How do I make my obsession to become, you wanted to know how do I do it, correct? How do I make it? I make it this way. You don't read it from there, but I read it for you. I use a single file. I work on a single file. I don't have 3 files, 5 files, and a new version on another file. No, I work on one file. In this file, there is everything that I know that is relevant to this study. Okay, references goes into this study, the title goes into the study, the introduction goes into the study. Everything is in the same file. Because if I start doing several files, I will lose it. All the people that works on this single project work on one file. And they all share the same file. It's important. It's practical, but it's very important. I make a backup copy. Some of us should have a backup copy. It's important. We have this problem. It's simple, but it's very important, you know? I mentioned this third point earlier. Don't be too sensitive, you know? We better improve our manuscript before we submit than to have a rough reviewer comment. Don't let me go outside without my trousers, you know? Say no. I mean, this is not an issue. We are on the same team. I'm not offending you. We are working on the paper. We want the paper to be perfect. If I have a doubt, I raise my hand and I say, are we sure we want to say that? Is this correct? Is this in our data? Okay? Don't be offended. Don't get offended. Be at work. It's like when you go and play football, you know. Don't be nice. Be effective. The last point, until few minutes before submission, until the very last moment before submission, the paper is open for changes. When it's submitted, then the ball is on the reviewer's side. But before submission, it's open to edits. What I want to say is that you might think you have written the title. You might think you have written the introduction. And then something comes, something is new, you have an idea, a better title, or something should be added, you change it, and then you change the manuscript accordingly. Okay? Don't be open to edit what you have done. Writing is not something that is on-off. Writing is a process. And so you verify, tomorrow you might want to change what you have done today. Because the night, you know, you sleep a little bit, your ideas calm down, and you get, you know, cooler, and then you want to say it another way. Okay. Structure of a manuscript. We all know this, and we will have some practical tips on how to write it. This is what Julia wants, practical tips. You too, Valentina, you want practical tips? Sure. Okay. Are we moving on some practical tips or no? We are too far in the theoretical yet. Okay. The title, introduction, methods, results, discussion. Part of the discussion is the conclusions, of course. I wouldn't wrote this way, but as in-depth references, tables and figures if necessary, and at the very end, when the manuscript is ready, I write the abstract. Okay? Abstract is not the beginning of my paper. Sometimes the abstract is the beginning because the paper or the preliminary results are presented into a congress. Then I go through this process and I rewrite the abstract. Okay? We don't start with the abstract. We start with the title and then the introduction. Here is how it goes. Title, what is the paper about? The title we will see in detail. Introduction, why do you do this? Study site is relevant when it's multi-center. Methods, how? Results, what I found, and what means what I found at the discussion. The title. Title is very important. You know, I tend to start a project writing a tentative title. You write the title. Eventually you will go through, you might change it, but the title is your idea, is the light in the sea, is the sea light, you know? And so you have to keep it. Write it down. Is also the advertisement for the paper. You cannot, or rarely, make a paper interesting for all the doctors. So if it's a neuro, if it's a craniotomy, you say craniotomy. And eventually, people that care for craniotomy will read this specific paper. Say what this study might tells to the reader. Anticipate to the reader what he might find in the study. Of course, do not use abbreviation in the study. You might use an ECG, but this is not the place to use abbreviations. Okay, so be clear in the title. When I think of the title and the introduction, I think of this. This is not a very nice funnel, but my students were not able to do a funnel better than this. So once we catch the attention of our readers with a title, we should drive the readers into this spiral that goes from the broader to more specific, like a funnel, you know? And you could not go out of this. Since this is the problem, it's been addressed this way, but still this is lacking, and this is what we are going to study.
So I have a question. How you make the people, or how you know that the title that you write down is going to be catchy? Did you, after writing the title, show to your students or?
Students don't
No, students don't, sorry, to
I try to be catchy, you know. I try when I was much younger. I've been working in a group at the University of Chicago, and the refrain was "Make the title sexy." How do you know when you're sexy? Okay, this way. Make it this way. You know, each of us has his own style. The way you write is part of your style, so should reflect you. Don't be someone else. Be who you are. Present yourself. Eventually, they will correct you. You will change, but be who you are. Be straight, be open, or be catchy, or be whatever. Be your style. Be sure that in the title there is the content, and make the content expressed in your way. It's important. You have to recognize yourself. Again, once eventually the title catches the attention, then you have to try to make this. Since we know this, that has been treated that way, but some part is missed, then we are studying this way. Okay? From the larger to the specific, what is lacking, and you have to feel exactly what you anticipate to the reader that is lacking. This is not necessarily true, but the way you tell them makes them entering in your wavelength. Okay? Introduction. Go from broad to more specific. You know, craniotomy is accomplished in 600,000 patients every year. I don't know. Every sentence in the intro should carry a dedicated reference, at least one. It's not in the introduction, it's not your opinion. In the introduction is the background, is the work in the literature you have done eventually through a systematic review or a throughout literature review. Okay, so you know which are the open problems, and then you drive your readers through what is known and which are the open questions. And so you add, you support what you write with a dedicated reference. If possible, if you have any experience, if you have ever published something before, establish your authority. You know, there are several, craniotomy is a complex surgical procedure, several aspects of coagulation in neurosurgery have been inadequately addressed, and you cite eventually yourself having treated one in one study the coagulation in craniotomy. Then you go to the last but one sentence. What is missed? You know, starting from the broader and going into more specific, there is a missing point. that you know because you studied the literature, and eventually you studied it in a systematic way. So you know everything on this specific point. And this, the last but one sentence, the last sentence before, no, okay. Okay, the last sentence before the aim of the study is the link between what is known and what you study. So it's exactly the point, but the relationship between coagulation and mortality is not known. If I say, but the relationship between coagulation and mortality is not known, which is going to be the aim of my study? Aim of this study is to evaluate the relationship between coagulation and mortality. Correct? Understand? Because if you come to the last but one sentence of the aim, of the introduction, before the aim, and you say, in the literature, is known this, is known that, is known that, but is not known, which is the relationship between sodium and neuronal function, which is the aim of our study. The aim of our study is to report the relationship between sodium concentration and neuronal function. Understand? So this last but one sentence is the passage before the goal. You know, you are not the one that made the goal, but you receive the ball and then you kick in. And this is the kick in. Understand? So when you write the introduction, you have to head for this sentence. You should already know. Since you know which is the aim of the study, I write it backward. Valentina, it's clear what am I saying?
But
I have the title.
Last line, yes?
Last but
Did
one.
you mean, no, the last sentence, the aim should be the first line of the last paragraph? Is it an error?
Here is a
Yes.
sentence.
Sentence
Here
last-
is the aim of the study. Title and aim of the study goes together. Relationship of sodium concentration and neuronal function after craniotomy. This is the title. Aim of the study is, aim of this study is to evaluate the relationship between sodium concentration and neuronal function after craniotomy. It repeats the title. Aim and title goes together. When I change the aim, I change the title. If I change the title, I change the aim. Okay? Then I have the title, I have the aim, I go backward, and I write the sentence before. If my aim of this study is to report, to evaluate the relationship between sodium and neuronal function after craniotomy, I know that the sentence before should support this aim. And we
So
know
the
how to
last
write.
sentence of the last paragraph is the aim of the study?
The last sentence of the introduction is the aim of the study.
Yes. Could you show us your last slide that confused me? No, the last slide, yeah. The aim should be the first line of the last paragraph, and that confused me, sorry.
You are right.
Yes.
The aim should, because this
And
is,
then-
I don't know why.
No, it's just a mistake.
Yeah, it's just a mistake. I'm sorry. The aim is the aim. I don't know why someone else, I didn't correct. The aim should be the last sentence of the introduction. The aim of the study is the last sentence of the introduction. This is clear. The sentence before is the linking sentence. Okay? So I know the title, I know the aim, and I write it back, the last but one, and then from here, I have to build up my introduction. Because the introduction should drive the readers to the linking sentence.
And did you start writing from the first time your article, from writing the title or the
title and the aim.
or the aim.
The title and the aim, they should go together. The title is the first thing I write.
Ah.
Immediately after I write the aim, then I write the last but one sentence before the aim. I write the title, the aim, and the last but one sentence, and then I go from above. Makes sense?
Yes.
Okay, Yulia? Understand? Okay. Neurocritical care for intracranial hemorrhage, a systematic review of recent studies. Aim of this system is to report the recent, including original studies published between September related to neurocritical in ICU. Correct? Last sentence, guidelines for the American Heart Association. I'm now showing you what I said, you know? Write the title, write the aim. The American Heart Association guidelines for managed published July 2015 included a formal literature search updated to August 2013. When goes my aim from? From 2013 to, you see? This the aim is supported exactly by this sentence. Because despite there are guidelines, the evidence included in those guidelines were limited to 2013.
That part will be your authority, right?
Say again?
That sentence will be your authority.
No, my authority, it comes earlier because in one of these references I'm author. Authority means I've already done this work, I'm already part of the game, you know, I already play in the top ranking teams in this championship. So establish my authority means to cite myself among the background. This is the introduction, you know, the funnel. Funnel ends up in the linking sentence. Linking sentence is built behind from the aim. But my authority is here. I'm one of these, I'm sure. I don't remember, but I'm sure I'm one of these. I've been already involved into this.
Is it good to self-citing? What's your opinion?
It depends. If you self-cite because it links, yes.
But
If
it's
you have
an artificial upgrading your work and your H index and so on.
artificially, artificially, if the background is the introduction, you know.
If the background is poor, of course you can cite yourself, but
If it's high and you participated into this in a critical manner, you say no, I don't cite myself. What do you think? I write a paper.
as for me, I cite myself also, but when
When it-
topic is very
When it's appropriate.
yes.
I'm a reviewer.
Mhm.
If the citation is appropriate,
Yes.
I appreciate it. If the citation is inappropriate, I reject the paper. So it's a balance. It's up to you. If you have an appropriate citation, bring it in. If you citate yourself just to say I've done something, eventually your entire work is going to be, rejected. So if you have a competence, Dr. Borosdina participated into the guideline of the European Society, write a paper on postoperative delirium, should her cite the guidelines? No.
So, if you're
Yes.
not afraid of rejecting, then you might self-citing
No.
in this manner.
Yes, you have. Guidelines are very prestigious. We made it already.
Mhm.
Guidelines are top ranking in prestige. You have to be there. No? It's appropriate.
Mhm.
You are part of the history of this field. You have to cite yourself. You have to know about where are you. No? You have to be sincere with yourself. I participated into the history of neuroanesthesia And in intracranial hemorrhage, I said something that no one said it before. Is relevant. No? Of course, if you cite yourself in a difficult intubation, no, doesn't fit. No?
It's all a question of the fitness.
Not fitness.
Fitness.
Okay.
Stronger.
Fitness is also important. But I think that if it's appropriate, it's better to cite. This is my opinion. You asked my opinion.
Yes.
You have my answer.
Thanks.
Okay, this is about it for title to introduction. I hope it's clear. We made it clear? Sorry. Title, aim of the study, the linking sentence, back to the introduction. If possible, include your citation if appropriate. Clear? Questions? Doubt? Methods. Be clear on what you are doing. Be very clear of what you want to do. Of course, if in your aim of the study, this is a systematic review, so we didn't meant to come out with a single endpoint. This is not inappropriate, but if you have a specific endpoint, you say, I will include all patients above 18 years and below 85 if you want, if necessary. I don't know why to not include the elderly patients that are more and more common, but in some cases they also define an upper limit. So when I do adults, I include all the patients above 18. If the primary endpoint is the relationship between sodium concentration and neurological outcome, the first thing you mention in your method section is data of preoperative. What means preoperative? 1 week before, 1 day before anesthesia induction, whatever, you specify. Specify, be clear. Sodium concentration and postoperative neurological function. What means postoperative? 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. Okay, how do you score the neurological function? Glasgow Coma score, whatever it is appropriate. This is the first variable. What else? Duration of surgery, intraoperative bleeding, body core temperature, and so on, are subsequent variables, eventually recorded variables that comes afterwards, should be listed afterwards because the primary endpoint comes first, and in the results will be reported afterwards. Okay, so in the results you follow the same sequence you have proposed in the methods. It's not in the method you say, in the aim you say I want to study the relationship between sodium and neurological outcome after craniotomy. In the methods you say I recorded the sodium, I recorded the neurological outcome. In the results you say duration of surgery was 25 minutes. No. Okay, if the study, the title identifies you with a certain specific endpoint, bring the answer to the endpoint that you declared. Otherwise, you want to say the duration of surgery or whatever it is important. Am I clear? You decide, you write the title, you write the aim, you write the primary endpoint, accordingly write the results. Don't start with another thing, because your reader wants to know what you tell him or her about the clinical research. You tell him right from the title. He wants to know what you declare you are going to share with him. Understand? So follow the same sequence that you declared. You declare it right from the title. if it's a systematic review, register on Prospero. If it's a randomized clinical trial, register it on TrialGov. If it's a systematic review, go on the risk of bias. For each study, as I anticipated, describe the statistical analysis, sample size calculation, the type of, the mean, the t-squared, whatever you think you will use. You can change it until 1 hour before submission. So if you included another type of analysis, you go back to your methods and you add, I multiplied by 5 just 3 minutes before. So what comes in your statistical analysis should come in your results accordingly. Again, we go, once we have written it, we go backward from the last line of the results, and backward and backward and backward, and we see if this sequence applies also to the methods. Take home message, please.
You always register your trials in only on trial.gov, or you
For
use
randomized.
randomized, but there are another registered, for instance, in Germany, DRKCM for randomized trials, and
I register in
only
TrialGov.
trial.gov.
Yeah. Now there are most of the journals requires for randomized trials requires the number of
Yes,
trial.
number, and also other registers, they give you that number.
Yeah, but since you want to publish in anesthesia and analgesia, they requires trial.gov. You better register in trial.gov.
I will give some clues in my time about the registry.
Okay.
Okay, take home message. Okay, I already said that we are not here to reinvent the wheel. Learn from those that came before, learn the methods, learn the answer, learn what has been proven and what has not been proven, what is still controversial. Learn from those that came before. And so, as I mentioned again, go through the methods section of all studies that address a clinical question you are evaluating, and to studies that have a similar structure, So you can approach the problem from two sides. All the previous studies that have been designed in craniotomy, and all the studies that have been run in sodium in perioperative. You have two ways of approaching the problem. Use both of them. Another important point, your question in a way anticipated this point, self-citation, plagiarism, and so on. Self-citation, if you have been part of the story.
Or you're using your own methods.
You have to use your own method. You cannot reinvent the method, say, I don't want to copy someone's methods. You have to copy. The methods should be the same, similar. Do we want to invent how the Glasgow Coma scale again? Every study we reinvent a way of measuring the neurological function. It's not possible. It's not meaningful. We have to use what is available. So methods should come from available methods. This is not common, but this is the correct way. I'll show you something on this, This is a review. As I said, some years ago, this has been published in 2013. I heard about neuroprotection with propofol. Have you heard about neuroprotection? You do. It's like triple H therapy in aneurysm. Everybody do neuroprotection. No. With propofol, you do neuroprotection. Correct. We do. We all. More serious is the brain damage, the more propofol you give. It's not true. You harm the brain. I've studied the point. The more propofol you give, the worse you do for your patient. And the clinical evidence available clinical evidence do not support what we say. It's interesting, you know? This is pharmacological perioperative neuroprotection in a qualitative analysis. So I ask myself, but do we know something? Because everybody say, okay, but you do more propofol, thiopental. When you finished with propofol and the patient is still doing bad, then you start with thiopental. We don't know. This is an invention. It's like the triple H therapy. Me, you, and her, and Valentina, we sit on the table and say, propofol is good for the brain. It's not true. Propofol reduces the brain serum O by 20% and reduces brain perfusion by 30%. So the perfusion and metabolic gap get worse. This is the truth. Understand? It's fun, isn't it? Because we all think that propofol protects the brain. But it's not true. And there are not clinical evidence that propofol effectively protects the brain. Neither barbiturates. It's fun, isn't it? So even simple questions are useful to make a point. Then you should start working. And as I say today, I know how to shovel the snow outside, but I will not go outside and do it. You go, and I will tell you where to do it from the window. A little bit on the left, a little bit on the right. I did it, but now, not anymore. So I came out with this question to myself: is it true that is there some room for proven pharmacological neuroprotection? Let me go through randomized clinical trials, because we now know that randomized clinical trials are the most relevant. The only, let's say, proven studies, if you do neuroprotection and perioperative, you have 6,000 papers. 6,000. Then, as Anastasia, poor lady, did it one by one, not in this study, but in this study, you start selecting those that are preclinical and throw away, because rats are rats. Those that are not controlled, those that are retrospective, those that this and that. And then you go at the end that you only have 25 randomized studies. It's interesting, isn't it? So all the clinical science, clinical in humans, on pharmacological neuroprotection relies on 25 randomized clinical studies. But the most interesting part of this story came afterward. This was already surprising to me. To you too, no? No, not that much. To me it was. The most interesting part of the story is that these 25 studies involved the evaluation of 17 different drugs. Everyone came out and said, I have the answer. Study ganglioside. And then another one said, I know which is neuroprotection, propofol. And then one else came and said, study a trovato, study. Everyone started again the story of humanity. And them all studied in a different way. So 25 studies, 17 different drugs, 19 different methods. It's amazing, no? Each one of them started again the history of human pharmacological neuroprotection. This study, this systematic review, has been the most read paper in British Journal of Anesthesia in 2013. In January 2013, the chief editor of British Journal wrote me a letter. Dear Professor Belot, you have contributed to a critical extent to the improving visibility of our journal. When you have another paper, please send it to us.
So you became popular.
I don't know if I was already popular. I was already popular.
Super popular.
Understand? No, I don't know if someone knows that the chief editor of British wrote to me. But because the chief editor balance the number of citation and the number of published paper, and they want the impact factor goes up, if you come out with an interesting paper, they are interested in having it published in their journal. Understand? But I think this is very meaningful example of how important is to go through the literature in that field. You know, which drugs should we study? How should we study? How many patients? Using which, you know, timelines and so on and so on and so on. We cannot reinvent science every paper we run, you know? Okay. Results. Of course, the very first sentence is the clinical and demographic, and then you go through the figures. It's not necessary to go quantitatively through each figure. You know, I see results that are a sequence of numbers. Say what is important. Say what you took the commitment to say, sodium and neurological outcome, then you say sodium and neurological outcome. This you gotta say, you know, clinical and demographic, and then sodium and neurological outcome, because I expect to find, you know, it's like when you go around with a beautiful lady, sooner or later. It's clear the example. Or beautiful neck, I don't know. Whatever it is. It cannot be only. In the results section, data should be interpreted, called as they are. Numbers with statistical figures. It's not better, it's not only 13%, 13%. Because you are disappointed if it's only 13%. You wanted to be 22. No, you are a scientist. You recorded this 22%, you reported this 22. It's not only. Understand? Sometimes you see, no, only in 20%. It's more, it's less, and it's not even necessary to say statistical significant. If there is a difference, it's statistically different. If there is no difference, you report no difference. 24 and 26. No? Or you can say, or you shouldn't say, but only 16% of patients with the sodium concentration below 130, there was a good study, a good neurological function. This is not the room for our opinion. It's room for figures, no results. Am I clear on this? So no comment, and no need to say reach a statistically significant difference. If there is a difference, means that it's statistically different. If there is no difference, means there is not statistically. We imply that it's statistically different. Correct? So 13, higher or better neurological function, ranking status at 6 months, 3 versus 4, open brackets, 0.05%. Correct? As I said, use the same sequence in listing the results as you proposed in the method section. You know, we have to ease, to simplify the life of our readers. Not to make like the crosswords, you know, 22, no, this is not the work. The work is to come out and make their life easy. If you want, I go, line 13. Line 13, I only read this. In this case, even though your study is on neurological function and sodium after craniotomy, but you tell me that you also reported hemoglobin, if for any reason, I'm doing a systematic review on hemoglobin in craniotomy, I want to know where you mention hemoglobin. I know that after 1, 2, 3, 4 variables, there should be hemoglobin. Understand? Because I might use your paper in a different way. So the structure should allow me to know, for example, page 6, there should be the number that I want to use. You don't have to force your readers to go through the nightmare that you have done. This is your nightmare, but for me it's only a paper. I want to have an information. And so use the same sequence of the take home message. Again, we are not here to write a crime story. Write down, right from the beginning, who is the killer, and explain how you came to understand it. Understand is a completely different style. When you are Agatha Christie, you write a crime story, you take the Orient Express, and when you are in Vladivostok, eventually it comes out who was the killer. Here is different. You jump onto the train and you say, he is the killer. I know because I found the knife under his bed in Vladivostok. Period. Understand this? We learn to write this funny way. I don't know if it's in Russia this way. You know? I always had bad scores at the high school, at the lyceum, because my professor said, you are too short. Have you understood what I meant? Yes. It's clear? Yes. It's correct? Yes. Why I have 3? Why you gave me 3? But you wrote only 2 pages. Okay, but it's clear what I meant. It's correct. You give me 3. We have to learn to be short and clear. It's not like at the high school. At least what it was my high school. Was the same at your high school?
I don't know.
Okay, you were smoking too much of my life. You are so young and you don't remember. How was it your high school? They wanted a huge, lots of pages. No? Well. Anyhow, here we should be short, clear, and following the structure that we anticipated. You know, be short and clear. It's not like in the high school. The best of my classmates in the high school wrote a lot, and at the end, 10. But you understand? No, read your composition, because at the end I couldn't even say if it was summer or winter, you know. 10. No. Here we have to say who is the killer. And second version, to complete this concept, we are not journalists. You know, journalist is someone that is not a specialist of nothing and make the composition very fuzzy, very confused, to make the readers believe that he knows more than they know. We have to make the opposite. We are the expert. So we have to make it clear, simple. If I can say it to someone that is not from our field in a very simple way, then it's clear. And that's because I am the expert. I'm not afraid of making it difficult. Understand? Things are already complex. There's no need to make it difficult. Say, what do you want to say? Is not known the relationship between sodium concentration and functional outcome after craniotomy. It's simple, you know, but the plasmatic concentration of positive cations might be relevant for the membrane of the neurons. No, it's too much. Understand the connection? Okay. So you have the liberty to be clear because you are the authority, you are the expert. Feel yourself being the expert, cite yourself, and excite. Again, present the data as you anticipate. I'm going to tell you this, and you say this. I'm going to tell you this, and you say this. Then you do the backward reading. You go through your results from the very last line and say, I'm saying this. Have I anticipated it? No. Okay. I'm saying also this. Next line before. Have I anticipated it? Okay, so you do a cross-check of yourself. Last point of this take-home message, respect your readers is very important. The key point of a scientific publication are the readers. Reviewers are in between the author and the readers. So when I'm a reviewer and I review a lot of paper, 30, 40 every month, understand? So I know a lot what is going on here, there, and so how do they write, how do they think, and so on and so on. I am between the readers and the author. But the final customer of a scientific paper are the readers, are your colleagues, are the one that might ask themselves, does pharmacological neuroprotection exist? Is there a relationship between sodium concentration and neurological function after craniotomy? Is postoperative anemia, hemoglobin below 10, frequent after craniotomy? And so on. Discussion. Discussion is the typical section where you have the panic of the empty sheet. No? You say, okay, I know, I wanted to know sodium and neurological function. I made it. Now discussion. Discussion looks like, sorry, not this way. Discussion doesn't look this way. Discussion looks this way. You know, I have some empty space, a lot, much, I don't know, some empty space to fill it. Generally, sorry, the way most of the authors, not them all, fill it, the discussion is amazing, you know. It's like a wedding menu. There is something of everything, you know. Someone likes more the lobster, someone's like red wine, and they come in. It's not this way. Generally, discussion should be kept meaningful and short, because we said before, respect your readers. They don't have time to go, you know, after you and your, no. Keep it short, keep it informative, keep it functional to the paper that you have completed. Functional is the key word. Keep the discussion functional. Okay. How do you keep it? You have to ask yourself, is this sentence functional? This is the question. Is this sentence functional? No, delete. Period. This is useless. Delete it. We don't have to fill, you know, some empty space. No. First sentence, this is why it came the error on the aim nowadays. Do you remember the...
Yeah.
Because the first sentence of the discussion is the linking point between the title, the aim of the study, and the first sentence of the discussion. Title. This is Prospective Observational Study on the relationship between the sodium, plasmatic sodium concentration and functional neurological outcome after craniotomy. This is the title. Aim of the study, we know. Aim of this prospective observational study is to report the relationship between sodium, preoperative sodium concentration, and functional 6 months status after craniotomy. First sentence of the discussion. In this prospective observational study, we proven, or we showed the original, if it's the first time, whatever is necessary to say, that higher or sodium sodium values below normal threshold are associated with worse functional status after craniotomy. Clear? So if you read the title, you read the aim, and you read the first sentence of the discussion, you already know what they wanted to say. Then you can close the paper and throw it away. But you have the information. Sodium values, preoperative sodium values below normal values are associated. You don't have to say the numbers, because the numbers only goes in the results. You say the meaning of what you found. Correct? Understand? So this is the first sentence. When you have the opportunity, I generally write the first sentence. I cannot say yes or no, but I write the first sentence of the discussion when I write the title. Understand? I cannot say if it goes left or right. I keep the two options, but I can write it. Okay? It's clear?
No,
The title. We have the idea. After the title, it comes the aim. Once you have the aim, you can write the first sentence of the discussion. Because there might be or there might be not a relationship. There might be a relationship, normal sodium values are associated with better functional neurological outcome. Or there is no relation, but you can already imagine the options your study will lead to. No? Is it clear now? Not really.
let's make an example.
Different from sodium and outcome, because sodium I made it. Okay, we made a different example. Do we want to talk about, let's say, a randomized clinical trial? No, I have the idea that, for instance, normovolemia instead of hypervolemia and neurological function after subarachnoid hemorrhage in aneurysm patients. We already know how it goes. Normovolemia goes better, because I told you before, this panel of experts thought about that and they say it, but the truth is that the patients died born. Okay, but then someone challenged this position, this statement, and say normovolemia versus hypervolemia in patients with subarachnoid hemorrhage due to cerebral aneurysm and mortality. Correct?
Correct.
Generally, they say neurological outcome and mortality. Then you can write the aim. Please tell me the aim.
So the aim will be.
Aim of this study.
The aim of this study is the correlation of normovolemia
Or
or
hypervolemia.
and like an outcome in patients with subarachnoid hemorrhage.
Amazing. Can you go to the first sentence of the discussion on this study? Can be either one or the other. Can either be normal or hyper, but you can imagine how can you write it. You can put a slash and say sentence 1 slash sentence 2.
Okay, so like sentence 1 can be like normovolemia is related with a better outcome in patients with
Or
hypervolemia.
hypervolemia. You got it now?
Yeah.
So there are only few options, or equal. You might be better, lower, or equivalent. But there are only few options. So you can already write which are the possible results, the possible, conceptual rather. Not the number. You don't have to write the number in this first sentence, but the concept. You prefigure that it can only be picture number 1, picture number 2, picture number 3. More, less, equivalent.
May I add something? If you allow me.
Of course.
The question is that
So I drink.
when he writes the aim, he still doesn't have had the study. So the aim is to study, to assess, whatever, but he doesn't know it's going to be the result, right? But the discussion, you're writing it once you have the result, then you already, by default, know which of the aim is the right thing. But at the beginning, you don't know.
You don't know, and you
Yeah.
shouldn't get in love with your idea. So this is why it's important to write this sentence right from the beginning. For you, all the options are equally nice. You don't want to show that it's better. Understand why it's important? Because you try, as I said, this is not an on-off approach. This is a process. So you try, then you think it back and you say, might be another option, might be a fourth option, might be a fifth option. But this is only the first sentence, always the first sentence. And all the options that come out, if possible, you have to love in an equal way, like your kids. You know, you love them more. It's not that better is better loved than lower. Understand? So you have to prefigure which are the possible exit. Okay? Because for you it's the same. You should be clear to say, I love the study as a process, not as a result. So you can write the first sentence. Second paragraph. The first sentence is a sentence and includes the conceptual result of what you find. For instance, in the neuroprotection, pharmacological neuroprotection, we originally reported on and no proven benefits on pharmacological neuroprotection. Correct? Second paragraph. The second is a paragraph, it's not a sentence. Second paragraph should report on available evidence. Is this that we proven or detected along with what was already available? You know? Or it's different, or it's partially different, or it's completely different, whatever it is. So get in touch with what was previously available, the literature. 2, 3, 4 studies, not the whole story of the world since Jesus was a child. Paragraph number 3. Identify 2 or 3 items of your studies, especially of the methodological section, that you want to comment. We decide to use the FANS scale for 6 months neurological outcome because this and that, instead of Glasgow outcome score. You know, we decided to use preoperative threshold, the sodium value of 135 because, okay, so comments on your own methods. In the methods you say threshold values for normal sodium values was 135 to 148.
Maybe it is better to put the comments on the presented methods in the methods section.
It's wrong.
Wrong?
Yeah, there is a section. Where is it? In the methods, you say how did you do? How did you did it? Normal values are sodium 135 to 148. You don't have to explain in the methods. In the methods, you say how you did it. In the discussion, paragraph number 3, you explain why. Someone else said eventually sodium concentration 132 might be acceptable, but we refer to the values from Kulikov and colleagues, and we think that normal values are 135. Okay, there is a place to motivate your decision. In the methods, you say what you did. In the discussion, you motivate your decision. Short. What is important? Not all the stories, and there was a duck, and there was a cow. Section number 4, the study limitations. We've proven what we intended to prove, but now that we have completed the study, we realized that if beside sodium we also measured potassium, would have added another relevant information. reaction, or instead of potassium, glucose, because glucose and sodium are the major component of osmotic pressure. Okay? You realize that something is missed that you couldn't, that you didn't thought in time, that, and you say, unfortunately, we did not. We only included these two variables, but we now know that it's important also to do this. Study limitations is different from common to the methods. Got it? Conclusions. In conclusions, this is the conclusion of the study that I showed before. Recent studies related to neurocritical care provide new information on risk stratification, hemodynamic and mechanical ventilation, and pharmacological neuroprotection. Okay, so in 2015, we came out with a systematic review on intracranial hemorrhage management 4 months after the guidelines of the American Society of Anesthesiologists and the neurologists, and even if only 4 months lasted between the publication of those guidelines and our systematic review, there were some novelties, something that was not mentioned in those guidelines and that we were able to highlight in our systematic review. And you highlight, you say, well, what is new? Is it references? References is the entry level of new scientists that are getting involved into projects. Accuracy of references display is author's responsibility. So is my responsibility, because being the first of the last author is my responsibility. And what I want them to know is that I don't want to lose my credibility because they don't write accurately the reference section. So the number, the family name, personal name, comma, space, family name, personal name, period, title, only the first letter in capital, the other one is small, depends on the individual journal. The name of the journal, as mentioned in the PubMed, we don't have to create. Anesthesiologist is anesthesiology for extended. British Journal of Anesthesia is BRJ Anest with the EA. Okay? You found how to cite a journal in the PubMed and cite it. The year, semicolon, space, volume, column, space, or not space, depending on the individual journal, pages, and not always the full point. We start to writing in a certain way, we learn to write in a certain way, I always write it in the same way, and then I adapt to the individual journal requirements. Okay? Very important. The concept goes for the systematic review. We have seen it before, 5,000 papers, then preclinical 2,000 excluded, 3,000 remains, not related. This is when you go through the literature, the concept figure. Tables try to be clear and informative. Again, not just to fill empty space. You have to say something. Is this table or figure useful? Yes, yes, no, no. The abstract. What is it? You say do an abstract. Generally it's this way, words in a bag, you shake the bag, throw the bag, the words out, and it's the abstract. No, it's not perfect. There is another approach. The approach is what we have said so long, Of course, we start from the title. Of course, we only have one sentence before the aim. So you have one sentence of introduction, the aim, one sentence or two sentences for the methods, one sentence for the results, one sentence for the discussion and conclusion. So short, 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 what we have said so long in the same structure into an abstract. Nice? Nice?
Short and nice.
Short and nice. Letter to the editor. This was 2000, I think. Yeah, 2000. This is a letter published in the New England Journal of Medicine on hiccup treatment in 3 cases of intractable hiccup that we originally published in the New England Journal of Medicine. So letter to the editor might present original information in a very short manner. Of course, for chronic hiccup, I don't know why New England Journal of Medicine had a specific interest and published a few couple of papers into this specific disease, and so we decided. Or you can publish again, New England Journal of Medicine 2007, a letter to the editor as a comment to a published paper. So this is what new scientists should do. Read, 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 and eventually if there is something not clear, something not correct, something methodologically weak, come to their senior and say, I'm not sure, is this paper, straight? Can we comment on this? Did the authors interpreted or presented their data correctly? I recently published last year a letter to the editor in Anesthesia and Analgesia on, as a comment to a huge retrospective study, more than 8,000 patients on the safety of ESA starch. You know ESA starch, the colloid. In the title, the authors reported safety, ESA starch safety in 8,000 perioperative cases, effects on renal function. They analyzed those data and reported. We retrospectively went over 7,000, 8,000 cases, and we reported that no difference in renal function at 1 week postoperatively. I went through the paper. At a certain point, into a table, they reported intraoperative blood loss, patients that received only Ringer lactate, 400, patients that received Ringer lactate and ESA starch, 895. P 0.0001. I wrote a letter. It was very interesting to read your paper. And I came to know, that confirmed, that there is no difference in this population, mean age 42 years, on renal function at 1 week. But why you miss the point that this patient had a blood loss more than double when they receive ESA starch or not? Understand? Because sometimes, or because they don't want, or because they miss. You think that they should be missed. That the patient's bleeding was more than double. Since there is a specific concern on the effect of intraoperative ESA starch administration because of the impact on coagulation and eventually intraoperative bleeding, I think that it's important to know the renal function, but also to know the intraoperative bleeding, because being simple surgeons, when you lose 400 or 350, it's okay. When you lose 890, means 2 packs of red blood cells. Eventually, that in a young person might be relevant. No?
Maybe in that group, the authors used ESA starch in case of bleeding, correct?
No.
To correct bleeding. How?
No.
What the population of, what the type of surgery you got?
Simple surgery. Simple surgery,
Simple.
Hernia
Hernia repairment.
Understand? They selected young patients undergoing simple procedures.
Because sometimes in discussion there is some
I understand.
misunderstandable what's due to what.
I understand.
What's the first, what's the second.
I know, but it's very interesting that sometimes the authors might highlight an endpoint that has no difference and do not comment on an endpoint that has a difference. This is a manipulation. No? But you can say everything. Anyhow, I'm there, I look at you. Either comes to me as a reviewer or afterwards, if I'm end of the end. No, end of this first section. Then we have Riccardo and few points. There is a method to write a successful paper. It's not when I start, it's not that I go, what am I going to do today? No. I know that, it's like when you go climbing in the mountain, when you do whatever. When you prepare for anesthesia, you prepare fentanyl, muscle relaxant, the propofol. You don't do. And for hypnosis today, no. You prepare propofol, correct? Or whatever you want. The use of this systematic approach, of this method, will help you to be familiar with what is the next things to write. You already know. After muscle relaxant is ventilation. And here is the same. After the title, the aim of the study. After the aim of the study, go back to the introduction, then the method. And this, of course, helps in not being stuck on the white sheet syndrome. Successful publication, to me, this is my experience, I step out, led to a virtuous process. The more you publish, the more you are known, the more you are confident, the more you are good, the more you publish. Because you learn. It's like anesthesia. No? If you do one anesthesia every year, every time. If you do several, it's the same for you. No? The next patient that comes to the neurocritical care is going to be new, but not, it's going to be okay. We manage. We try to manage. How to read. Read not only in terms of information, but in terms of structure. Now you have some items to see the structure of what you are reading. Some are good. Generally, not always. In prestigious journal, you have good papers. So you go to Circulation, you go to the Lancet, you go British Journal of Anesthesia, British Journal of Medicine, New England Journal of Medicine. These are good papers. You can learn. They have a structure, short introduction. I made an introduction, 1 page, double space. When you write in science, practical tips, always write double space. And introduction is 1 page. 1 page enough at the most. Okay, so I do the title, and I do next page, and I have an empty page. I immediately write the aim, and then I fill it to 1 page. Then go to the methods, and you refer to someone else. You pick up the best, like a bee, from the methods on this specific paper, so on. So read, even, and especially the structure of what to do. I read more the structure than the context, than the single information. And very, very important, we say that, make up your mind with clinical questions. What am I doing? Fluid therapy, triple H therapy, sodium concentration, all the practical things, neuroprotection, all the practical things that we often gave as known, as accepted, eventually they can be reviewed. Analgesia and pediatrics, you are in a group, we do this way. Why? Because we have always done this way. This is not an answer. No? You have been wrong, and you want me to be wrong as you have been so long? No. Okay? Last point, very important, we mentioned that when you are in a group, it's easier, or search for help. It's like when you are in trouble in clinical practice, search for help. Search for someone that you have a good relationship, that has an esteem, that has an experience, like in clinical practice. Now I'm senior, but when I was younger, I wanted to know who is the senior around. Now they do it with me, but unfortunately. And so search for a senior, search for a senior author, because when you are in trouble, it's important to say, Federico, please come now. And I understand. When you say now, it's now. Thank you. Do you want the break now?
Yeah, before we start, I should ask you to stand up, everybody.
And
Take the seat, just 1 minute.
take a few minutes of no. No, it was a little it's the longest speech I ever had. It was too boring. It was too boring.
No, it wasn't boring. It was fun.
Now you can take me over 2 hours.
I hope not.
Закрой, если yeah, please.
First, I would like to thank Dr. Ross to invite me to be here and Professor Vilota to share with me the session, which is for me an honor. It's my first time in Moscow, in Russia. So I'm very happy to be here. I hope it will be the only time I will come back. I don't need that to invite me, but I will be glad. Professor Vilota asked me to give you my experience about how to prepare a project. But my experience is not as much as his, so I rather thought that it would be more interesting for you to share my mistakes. So I've made many mistakes along my research career, and you learn a lot from the mistakes. So if you manage to learn a bit from my mistakes, maybe you're not going to repeat them. So I think it can be useful. I would like that you interrupt me as many times as you want to ask me details about things, or even if you do not agree with what I say, just say, regard, what, how, huh? So we will use a bit more. And I'm going to be that long as Professor Vilota, so it will be shorter for you buttons too. This lecture comes before Professor Vilota lectures. We aren't going to write a paper yet. We want to think about a research. So the first thing before starting the research is to have the idea. What I'm going to study. And this how the thing starts. What I'm going to make a research about. This idea can come in different ways. The most common way is your own clinical experience. Something that happens to you, so you are interested and study about it. For example, I have one example of one thing that happened in our group. We used to do a kind of operation which is neuroendoscopy in our operating room. And after we've done some dozens of neuroendoscopies, we realized that our patients awake lately than expected. We don't know why. It was something that we observed in our own experience. We did not know why. So we decided to study about that. So you get an idea of something that's happening to you in your place. Another possibility is that you studied a lot, you've read, as Professor Villota said, and you have an idea. So we have read, for example, in this other study, that laryngeal mask was useful to improve the hemodynamical response in the induction compared to intubation. I read some papers about it, but none of them was in neurosurgery. I said, why don't I study this in my field? Maybe it has some advantages in my field that nobody has think about it. So I said, it's a good idea to do that. And finally, a colleague discussion. See, colleagues discussion. This is one of our most recent studies. I just presented last week in the snack. With one colleague of my department, with Professor Fabregas, we had a discussion. She was using regularly magnesium during the craniotomies. I didn't. I said, why are you using it? I asked her. And she told me, well, because magnesium has demonstrated usefulness in the use of supragnodal hemorrhages or strokes, and I think that it can be useful in craniotomies too. And I said, I don't agree. Nobody has demonstrated this. Okay, let's do a study. Well, so we planned a study to know who was the right one. So, good question, huh? She was the right one. Although I'll give you some more clues about this later. So, the idea has to come from your own resources, your own field, no? And also do research on what you're interested on. Right? It helps you to go on because you're interested on the result. You want to know. So you are the first interested on the research, no? Because you're working for you, and then you will share it. You will share it with the others. But first, I'm interested to know, right? So think what you're interested, and then go on. Okay, well, I got the idea. Well, maybe it's good or maybe it's bad, but you don't know. You have to discuss it with your colleagues. So ask Professor Villota, the boss, to tell you, is that right? Do you think it's intelligent, it's relevant, or I'm saying a silly thing? It's absurd to publish, to research on this. Is it helpful? I'm going to lose my time. So ask your boss, not your boss, your colleagues. Even if you are the boss, you have to ask your colleagues. No? Boss doesn't have the right answer always. Right? So share your ideas, ask your colleagues, ask for advice, and decide if this is a good or not good study to start. Okay, you decide that this is a good study. Let's go on. Research bibliography. Now is the time to make the research bibliography. Just after the idea. Not what the study is done, then you start looking what is written already. Just before you do anything. Research bibliography. You have to spend some time to do this. Has anybody already done this before you? Or what have done? Maybe they have done it in another field. For example, the example I told you about the laryngeal mask, it was done in abdominal surgery, for example, but not in neurosurgery. Good, neurosurgery. That's a good idea, neurosurgery. No? Or they have done it inserting the laryngeal mask just before and I'm thinking about doing just after. Well, I can do it just after. Maybe it has some advantages. So read what already has been done and think the way you're going to do it in another way. And you have to do it always. Always. And always before writing the research protocol. Always before you start. You have to know what it has been done. When you have done this bibliography, you write your background. That background is going to be the future of the introduction of your paper. So this is job that you already have done much before you write your paper. You have to let people know, you have to know already what we already know about this topic. This is anesthesiology. You find in the originals in anesthesiology, there is one sentence. What we already know about this topic. So you have to know what is in your topic before you start, and what it is not. Because what it is not is the previous last sentence in that. Huh? Right? So when you know what is done, then you plan which is the aim of your study. As Professor Villota said before, this is the last relevant paragraph of your introduction. What are you going to do? That is it. When you are doing your bibliography research, spend your time in classify, taking notes, order them, write down what you find relevant in this paper. You can think that now you're losing a lot of time, but you want to go to do the research. No? But you're saving a lot of time for later, when you will go back to the references to see what they have done, or to see, just classify the reference. This is good, this was done with animals, this was done with the laryngeal mask before, so classify them so you know where to find the result. You will forget in 2 months, or in 6 months, or in 1 year, which paper was the one telling you that they were using the laryngeal mask before. Because you have 50 papers, or 60, or 100 papers that you have read, and you don't know which one was, if you don't classify them. So use your time to do this before that. Now you can use RefWorks, Mendeley, some tools that help you to classify your references in advance. Okay, the aim of your study is to analyze the effect of the laryngeal mask, blah, blah, blah. But what is your hypothesis? What do you think is going to happen? Be specific, definite. Probably this hypothesis will be the first sentence of the discussion, right? Probably, if you're right, that probably will be. You have to write this hypothesis very clear, very easy to understand. Some said that if my grandma is not able to understand my hypothesis, I write it wrong. So you have to write it very, very, very clear. Because you need to know what you're looking for. If you in advance do not know what you're looking for, you're not going to understand what you will find. So make clear idea of what your hypothesis is. And it's just going to be one sentence. Now this is one of the hypotheses of one of the papers I showed you before. The peaks of intracranial hypertension during the endoscopic procedures produce sharp reductions of cerebral perfusion pressure. That was our hypothesis. We didn't know if we were right or wrong, but we thought that what we were going to find. These CPP disturbances translated to changes in process EEG and cerebral oxygenation, provoking the appearance of postoperative complications. So this is what we think. You have to know what you think you will find. Then the primary outcome. You know which is your hypothesis, and you need to know what are you going to look for, which is the most important variable you want to measure. This is a very relevant question, because you're not going to change that later. You have to decide it at the beginning, not later. Which outcome should I use? Well, anesthesiologists very often use hemodynamic changes, blood pressure. Easy to manage, easy to measure, but those are not often relevant outcomes. Normally, the reviewers, the journals prefer relevant outcomes, mortality, incidence of myocardial infarction, for delirium in the postoperative period. I mean, relevant outcomes are generally most well accepted. But also look for outcomes that are easy to sell to the reviewers, to the ethics committees, to the sponsors who are going to pay for your study if you find some. No? So think about outcomes that are good to pay. It is important to think that you are going to choose your outcome now because you're going to change it later. I will show you one of my mistakes later about that. No? And you will realize how cruel can be science. And another important thing about choosing the outcome, because the sample size will depend on this outcome. And as already Professor Villara said, sample size is very important in order to make your article well done. Your outcome has to be very applicable. It means that it has to make sense what you're looking for. No, it's something benefit for the patients. It's something that reduce cost in your field. It's something that improve the quality of your medical attention. It has to be valid and clearly defined. Very clear, very standardized. Probably the experts most of the time can help you to make sure that your outcome is well chosen. It has to be practical. It has to be easy to find, reliable. It has to be pertinent. It has to have a relationship with your aim. I'm going to find the laryngeal mass work better. Okay, let's measure the blood of sugar. Make it easy to understand. Try to find an outcome that is prevalent. Outcome on complications on, myocardial infarction after craniotomies. I mean, you're going to have one in 1,000 patients. You're going to never end this study. No? Try to look for the outcome that is related to the effect size. No? Then you will be able to reduce the sample size too. Remember that the sample size is important, so the outcome has to be adequately powered. Okay, we know all these things. We know what we've written, we know the aim of our study, we know our hypothesis, so we now have to write the protocol, the whole protocol. And it has a lot of practical aspects to consider. Let me go one after the other. The patients. Don't forget that the patients are the most important part of our work. So the patients are not something we're going to use to find our results, our study, to put our name on the top of the list. The patients are the reason why we're doing the studies. Right? So you have to consider this. So try to use the less possible patients. No? You don't want to put patients because, right? In this case, the analysis of the sample size is relevant too. Why do we have to consider the sample size in one of our studies? The sample size mainly is useful to be sure that when you do not find a difference, it is because this difference doesn't exist, not because you were not able to find it. Because I checked 5 patients and 5 patients, and I found no differences. Maybe if I check 10 and 10, then the difference will appear. And for sure, if I study 100 and 100, probably the difference will show up. Right? So it is very important. But at the same time, is this sample size realistic? May I do it in my field? How long does it take for me to do this? If I'm trying to find how many myocardial infarctions I have in the craniotomies, and I have 1 myocardial infarction every 1,000 patients, how many thousand patients I will need to do this study? If I need 5,000 patients, can I do it by my own? Well, if I work in this hospital, probably yes, no, but not in mine. No? Maybe you need help to do this study, with a multi-center research trial. One of my mistakes, many years ago, I worked in the pathology operating room, and we thought that it would be a good idea to give meperidine to our cataract patients to avoid coughing, because coughing while the cataract surgery could be bad. So we did a randomized clinical trial, no, randomizing patients meperidine or non-meperidine, and we started doing the procedure, collecting patients, no, and after we've done, I think it was 100 patients, we stopped, we made the statistical analysis, and we found no differences. We were absolutely sure that we were going to find a difference, but couldn't find it. So then we asked to one of our colleagues, which is a statistician, can you help us to assess if we're doing right? And he made some very simple calculations in 10 minutes. He said, well, I think that you have a problem. Yes, because to assess this hypothesis, you need about 600 patients. We ended up with a letter to the editor. Our negative experience with meperidine. Right? So make sure you do things in advance when we go on to the statistician approach later. This is a very typical mistake, not to make the assessment on this in advance. Just still talking about the patient's informed consent. It is time already to ask for informed consent to all our patients. We cannot do anything without them knowing it. Especially when we are potentially putting them into risk, or when we are using alternatives that can be different, and we don't know yet which is better. Patients need to know that. So you have to ask for informed consent always. Even in case reports, patient needs to know that he is going to be reported in a journal. He is someone. Most of the journals can even ask you to show the consent obtained. So it's absolutely mandatory to have informed consent. The review board will ask you for the informed consent of your study, for sure, before starting. Let's go with the methods. Professor Vilota already said something about this. No? Methods has to be comprehensive, full describing the situation, but they have to be clear, no chance for subjectivity. Everybody needs to know exactly how to do it. You better write them in the chronological order. The patient go to the operating room, he gets some midazolam, then we monitor with this monitor in this electrocardiogram, and then we put an arterial line on the right artery, and we use this monitor. Then we use the induction with propofol, these doses, with remifentanil, these doses, with rocuronium, these doses, and then we do an intubation 3 minutes. So it has to be very well described, so anybody can do the same as you have done, and everybody can understand how you have done. So always think that you have to write down in a way that anybody is able to repeat it again exactly as you did. And it is particularly important also in your own setting. Imagine that you are doing the same protocol 3 or 4 colleagues. You have to do exactly the same. Otherwise you're putting some bias in the same study, in your own group. Investigators. Who is the investigator? Well, maybe you've got the idea, and you want to be the first investigator, the principal investigator, but generally you have to ask for who is going to be the first investigator, especially if you're going to face a grant evaluation. If you're going to get money for that, then you have to choose your principal investigator very carefully. Do you know Rosalia? Any of you? The youngest ones? No? Well, it's a Catalan international singer, no, which is now very famous even in the States, right? And she has a song which is The Fucking Money Man. So your personal investigator has to be the fucking money man. No? Is the one that gets the money. And you know, money calls money. Right? So you find a person, a primary investigator that has already had some grants, you have more chances to get grants. No? Professor Vilota has got a lot of grants. He's a good primary investigator. Join him to get more grants. Once you've got a couple or three of them, then you can try to go as a primary investigator too. Right? And also it's relevant the experience. Right? In any grant you're going to ask, you're going to write there which is the experience of your team, and particularly the experience of your primary investigator. Right? No, I have a good idea. Yes, but what you've done before? Nothing. Okay, next. Right? So, particularly with the primary investigator, you have to be careful. But other than you have a lot of people that's going to work with you. Are you going to have a research nurse? Lucky you. Or at least some nurse that helps you? Much easier. What about your colleagues? Who is going to help you? Not just the anesthetist, but others that were going to be around. For example, surgeons. I don't know here in Russia, but you're always fighting with surgeons. Right? To try to involve them in the research. Try to make them feel that they are part of the research. No? They are even going to help you. May I help you with this? No, I'm just making the transcranial Doppler. Just in 2 minutes I'm ready. Okay. Do you want me to try? No, I better do that. Thank you. No, so try to involve them in a way that they feel that they are part of it. Otherwise, with surgeons, it's difficult, particularly if you are delaying the beginning of a surgery or delaying the whatever. So try to involve all your team, list them. For sure in a grant, you will need to list them. Make everybody feel in the project. And then the money. The money. This is another session, right? Money is another session. Where do you get the money? From the pharma? Well, you have to be Professor Vilota to get the money from the pharma. Right? Otherwise, they look for you. You don't look for them. One of my mistakes, for me, I call Orion Pharma in Finland because I had an idea. I'm a relevant professor at the University of Barcelona. I'm nobody, right? I called them. Said, we're not very interested. Thank you very much. But you can do the study if you want. But I think we're not going to have money for this study. Okay, so don't lose your time trying to get money from the pharma to do a study unless they come to you to ask to do that. You at least have to know that it's this way. It's I think more an art than a science to get a grant. This is another lecture today. Well, I can do the study with my own resources. Well, you're a very rich man, or you're not going to do it because low-cost projects or they hide expenses. I mean, I'm going to do 3 MRIs in my patients, but the hospital is going to pay it. So this is not count expenses. Or in general terms, low-cost studies are poor quality studies. Unfortunately, studies needs money to do them, right? Anyway, you have to prepare the budget. You need to know how much money is going to study cost before you do that. You have the money or you don't have it. But at least you know what do you need to do this. Right? Maybe you arrive to this point and then you have to wait until you get the money to go on. Do not start unless you have the money, because your study is not going to go on. The equipment. I have to plan what is the equipment I need. What do I have? What do I have in my operating room? Do I have my monitors? Which monitors I need? Sometimes we need to ask someone to let a monitor, or maybe even sometimes to some companies. May you loan the monitor to me? Be aware of that. You may start the protocol, and then when you're in the middle, say, I would need my monitor back. So consider this, this kind of loans before starting your position. Time. Research is very time consuming. Very time consuming. a sentence that I've heard sometimes, we're going to start this study, let's start collect patients, I will write down the protocol when I will have time. Well, if you do not have time to write the protocol, you have no time to do the study. Right? So first is first, and then you will start studying. It's very time consuming. A statistical assessment. This is Jose. This is my, I can say friend, which is my statistical colleague that helps us with most of our studies. Do this always before starting the study. Once again, before starting the study. Mainly in this case for the sample size. No? If you try to do this later, as I showed you before, it may be too late. No? When you already have done a lot of work, you realize that your work is wasting time. So always ask for statistical advice before. They can also help you to the data collection, how to collect the data, and of course, we already know data analysis. If you're doing data analysis that is a bit more complex, then you already know how to do it. Anyway, if you're doing research, I recommend you to have a base on statistical knowledge. As well as in English knowledge, statistical knowledge is relevant. I have one colleague that many years ago came to me and said, okay, Ricard, I've done a case where I check for the levels of cortisol. And I take one sample before the surgery, one sample before the adrenaline, the suprarenal extraction, one sample after the removal, and one sample after the surgery. Ah, yeah, interesting. How can I find the P? So, sorry? How can I find the P? But what do you mean the P? You have one patient. Yes, but it has to be significant. Well, yeah, it seems that it goes down, but you cannot find it. You have to have some knowledge about statistics before going to the research, right? You have to know what you're looking for. Data collection has to be very specific, very clear. No? You're going to make sure that you are collecting all the data you need. Otherwise, come back to the records is not possible. You will forget things for sure. So always in advance, prospectively, write perfectly exactly what you want to check. Do it always, once again, before, be clear. If you use an electronic way to do that, probably you will also need some prints to do it in your real field, then to take it to the electronic register. Data. Data are amazing. You know now everything. You know exactly what F means DCI, which is this number, Y0, what's 01. But in 6 months you will forget everything. Code and register your codes very easy. Codes have to be very specific. Obvious, explicit, stupid. Write down exactly what you mean. Why did I put this in blue? I don't remember at all. Well, why did I mark these patients here? I forgot it. And imagine once you write the paper, send it to a journal, and the reviewer said, you have to tell me, panic. No? I don't remember why or how or when. All journals go through a statistical review. Be afraid of the statistics review. They are terrible. They are terrible. They need to make sure, they are mathematics. They are not a mathematics 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They are going to ask you a lot of things. Outcomes, statistical methods, type 1, rare missing data, sample size limit. Be aware of that. Once again, I will show you one of my most terrible mistakes on that. And that's your point about trial registry. You have to register your trial, even if it's not a trial, even if it's just an observational study. I recommend you to do that, to register your study. You can do that in clinicaltrials.gov, which is the most well-known, it's the American one. you have to go to the European one. There are several, there are even one in Russia that you can choose. But be aware that not all journals accept all trial registry. For example, the Russia is not listed in the anesthesia and analgesia list of the registries that are accepted. So try to go to a registry as Professor said that is widely accepted and do it before starting the study. My worst mistake ever. The study of the laryngeal mask, I sent it to anesthesiology. It was corrected, reviewed a couple of times, and it was going to be accepted. The editor sent me this letter that they sent to the statistical editor, and they detected that the primary outcome registered in the clinical trials, that was systolic blood pressure, differs from the presented in this manuscript, mean blood pressure. Different outcome that I said at the beginning. Even more, the study was registered on October 18, 2012, when the study had already completed. I registered because I didn't know. I registered at the end. When somebody told me, did you register the study? I said, no. Okay, do it. So I did it. So I got a refused paper in anesthesiology just because those stupid silly things. No? Because I still don't know why I write down in the clinical trial systolic and then in the manuscript mean. I don't know. I don't know. The editor told me, this is a serious research misconduct. It's terrible. It's terrible. So right here in your mind, do register always my studies in advance and think very carefully of my first outcome, because I'm not going to be able to change it. Right? Or you won't be published in anesthesiology. Okay, the institutional review board, important, mandatory. Not just because it's going to be needed for the publication. They're going to ask you the reference number of the RRB. Sometimes some journals even ask you for the name of the chair of the institutional review board. Right? You have this, but it also to make sure that you're following the ethical rules to do these studies. Right? It's mandatory. It's mandatory. Sometimes they are a bit pushy, no? But you have to follow it. Sometimes they do not know exactly what you're talking about because they are not anesthesiologists maybe, but you have to make them understand that what you're doing is okay. They probably ask you for their consent, sell them the consent that you are going to do, etc., etc. It's very important. And more than this, you have to be with goodwill in general. No? I told you about the patients, but think also about the impact on the people who is around you. And I told you about the surgeons. Consider that you're going to delay the operation. Think about the nurses that probably will stay half an hour longer in the operating room because you're just measuring the transcranial Doppler in their patient. No? Be nice with them, involve them, as I told you before. Involve your nurses. They can also be part of the authorship or at least the acknowledgements of the paper. Right? So be good with your colleagues. Okay, now your study is done. Now you have to publish. You have some clues, but even more, you have done most of the work because the introduction and the methods is already written. You're written at the beginning, right? It's just to make some adjustments, probably reduce it a bit, but it's already written. You don't have to repeat it once again. And focus on how to deliver the results. Probably Professor Vereda should have been talking about one. No more. But always focus on one thing. When you go to a study and you pass the abstract and so on, you always go to the most interesting figure or the table. The figure that is going to represent the main result of your, no? So put a lot of attention to that figure. Because when somebody is going to use your study, they are going to find out which is this most important result in that figure, that table. Right? So think about that. Once again, about the title and the abstract, Professor Vilota has said. Title is very important. I'm going to read your paper if the title says what I'm looking for. Otherwise, I will pass. And then after the title, I will read the abstract. If the abstract is not interested, I won't read anything else at all. So the title and the abstract must be very carefully written to make sure that someone is going to read the full paper. Okay, you're going to send the paper for publication. Before that, check for the standards. Maybe your paper is very nicely written, but do not follow the standards. They're going to send you back even before reviewing. There are standards that you have to follow. The Equator network, you have an easy, you will put in the internet, Equator, you will find. There are standards for all types of articles. Standards for clinical trials, a standard for observational studies, a standard for meta-analysis, a standard for everything that you have to fill. Otherwise, your paper will go back to you before doing anything else. Some recommendations. Read also about how to write. There is a list of anesthesiology, for example, papers helping you or giving clues about how to write paper, how to do the statistician approach, how to. You need to study this too. There are plenty in anesthesiology. I mean, they have this, but there are many others that you can collect. And finally, follow the instructions of the journal you're going to send. Carefully, strictly, with detail. Reviewers hate the authors that do not follow it. If they say that the abstract should have 100 words, why do you use 103? No? If they say that the references have to be in the way that Professor Vilota has written down, why you don't use them? If they say use things like this, why you force me to read it in the other way because you think it's better? No, just follow the rules of the journal. And then things will make smoother for the reviewers, so they will be happier to evaluate your paper. Last slide, take-home messages. Research is fun. I like doing research. But it's very time-consuming and money-consuming a lot. Follow the rules. Everything is written already. Do not invent the wheel again. No? Just follow what is written. No? Follow what everybody has said. So you're not going to lose your time, and you're not going to make the others lose their time. And make your own mistakes. You learn a lot from your mistakes. And I hope that you have learned a bit from my mistakes this evening. You have my email here. So if Professor Vilota do not answer you in 48 hours, you can ask me what you want. Thank you very much.
It's your turn.
We can do questions later.
If there are questions, please. It's better immediately.
Do you have
They are so
questions?
shy today.
Yes. Do you have? No questions while we change the slides?
How it works.
About endpoints and outcomes of the study, if you compare, for example, mortality, there are a lot of things that can affect mortality, and it is difficult to define whether your intervention affects precisely mortality. And because of that, I always thought that better to investigate the hemodynamics variables because they're easy to measure and so on.
Sure.
But you're told that it is better to choose.
Yes, because this is a balance. It's easy to measure blood pressure, but the relevance of measuring blood pressure is much less.
But it shows the difference between investigation.
Sure, it can show the difference, but the relevance about difference in mortality is much more interesting, isn't it?
There are many studies that shows no difference mortality,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean that this intervention is bad or good.
No, it just means that the mortality is not different. It depends on how deep onto the relevance of the study goes. I agree completely that mortality is a very difficult outcome. And the studies to demonstrate that there is a difference of mortality are very much difficult. In general, those studies are multicentric studies with a lot of thousands of patients included. And this is because you need to make sure that the randomization is well done. If you do mortality study with 100 patients, the randomization probably is not well done. You cannot find any solution. So I haven't done ever a study about mortality. It's too complicated.
I think it's difficult for anesthesiology. This maybe have a value in intensive care.
Well, a mortality study is something that goes across our operating room. Right? It's something that deals with our operating room, the intensive care, the admission in the hospital, and probably even the patient care out of the hospital. So this is why this is so difficult to assess. Normally, anesthesiologists, if we are in the operating room, do not find really easy access to these things. And most of the time, our intervention is small compared to the, as you said, the other things that can interfere in the mortality. Right? But there are studies, quite a lot, done by anesthesiologists, quite a lot, just doing interventions during the operation that have shown differences in mortality. For example, there is a group doing research in cardiac surgery where they have studied the autoregulation, cerebral autoregulation during the operation. They have checked which is the lower blood pressure in the autoregulation, you know, and demonstrated that those patients who were during the operation below this low autoregulation limit had an increased mortality than those patients that were in the autoregulation plateau during the operation.
But this is an observership study, they have no intervention. They just
Uh,
observed the measures.
That study was not a randomized study, it was an observational study, prospective observational study, which is not, as Professor Beto said, the top of the studies, but the outcome was really a top one.
And it was significant.
It was. I mean, probably it's difficult for us to think that something small that we do can affect mortality for our patients, but it can. You know, so we can be also great researchers too. So we think that we're maybe tiny specialists just in the operating room, but we can do great things too. So for sure, to begin to do research, you cannot go to these studies. It's by your own, it's very difficult to raise them, very difficult to plan. You need a lot of money. So probably at the beginning, as I did, blood pressure measurement, now comparing now with pinchal mass, it's easier. It's more out in your control area, so it's easier to do. No, you have to start with this. I recommend you to start with this. But do not think that you cannot go further. You can. Anesthesiologists can. There are plenty of nice studies.
What's your name?
Natalia,
Natalia.
thank you.
If I can complete what Professor Barrero was saying, we both mentioned go through the literature, try to see what they used as endpoints, and see which one of these endpoints you can use. Because of course, it would be very interesting to have, all mortality studies. but it's also very complicated because in this case, as you say, there are many variables, so you have to normalize, to simplify, and select more homogeneous cases. Then you will arrive in time to do complex and heavy, this is called heavy endpoint, heavy endpoint studies. But at the beginning, one step at a time, you cannot start running if you don't learn to walk. Understand? So go easier, and then in time, you challenge yourself with more sophisticated endpoints. You will be tomorrow at this session. So I will bring some studies. Some refers to hemodynamic variables, some refers to mortality, some refers to other endpoints, and so on and so on. You will see that there is a grading. So do something that is within your limits, that you can make it, with your patient, with your caseload. Understand? No, thank you. More questions? Nastia. Nastia.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anastasia Valentina. Thank you for
She's
inviting
fluent in Russian, but
Yeah.
I've asked her to speak in English, otherwise I don't understand.
Yep. Здравствуйте. Я буду делать презентацию на английском, но, в общем, тоже. Thank you for inviting me today, and Federica asked me to share my story of how I got involved in writing papers. So back in 2012, I was a resident in Petrovsky National Surgery Center, and Professor Musica, he introduced me to Professor Belota, and at that time I was searching a topic for my own study, and I thought that postoperative delirium is a nice topic to study. That's how we got into a long relationship with Federico. Now it's been 7 years. We have about 10 papers published. I have 4 kids, and I moved 2 countries. So this is a recent paper that we published. It's a systematic review, perioperative cognitive evaluation. It was published in 2018 in current opinion in anesthesiology. So when you get a message from your boss, do you want to participate in the review? You sort of you say yes because you're motivated. You want to be professionally. You want to develop professionally. You want to be prestige papers, so you are motivated. You say yes, and then you get this. Here's the topic: perioperative cognitive evaluation. You got say 3 months to write it, and here's out the criteria. So the publishers what limits, special. We'll go through the criteria. So when you get the topic, you need to define the topic of your study. So just ask yourself what you know about this topic, what you want to share with your colleagues about this topic, what is your own message. So with the perioperative cognitive evaluation, what I would like to tell you is how to actually measure the postoperative cognitive status and what will influence on this status. So, and when you get this idea, you keep it in mind, and this will be the base of your writing and your introduction. Then start planning. Planning is crucial. So, because you have a time limit, you have a special criteria, and you can't waste any days. You can't do just work. You need to be very efficient to do that. Good planning is very important. So always plan according to publishers' guidelines. Every journal has their own format, and you have to remember it. And again, don't waste your time. Just do what you're required to do. Remember the due date. Aim to finish 4 to 6 weeks earlier, because you need to send it to your colleagues. You need to have time to rewrite it, to make changes. You need time for your boss to read it and to reply to you. So that can take 48 hours or maybe a week. Do a literature search. Do literature search, just for first one, the very first one, as many papers as you want. But choose only 2 to 3, the most valuable ones, and then start brainstorming. What do I do when I brainstorm? So I just have a piece of paper, a clean piece of paper, and just write all the ideas I have after I've read a couple of papers. So just write them, you know, whatever you want. Then planning. So when you write a paper, when you participate into review, it's not just you, it's usually people, about a team. So about 3 to 4 people who you share your writing with. So when you do the planning, this is the basic format. Federico already told us about it. So, but again, every journal has their own format, so you might end up not having discussion, but just conclusion. Not conclusion, just discussion. So, and you, before you go into details, ask your team who's going to take which section. So if you, and ask yourself first which section would you like to do by yourself. So maybe you like conclusion and you're good in it, so you take discussion conclusion, or maybe you like the introduction and method. So just make it a bit more easier for you. Plan each section into details. I will go in the next slide and explain what I mean. Write all headings and subheadings. Each section has to have its own introduction, body, and conclusion. And remember that all publishers have their own format. So here's the plan that we had for our last paper. So we had introduction, and with the planning, so we had to have definition of postoperative cognitive delirium, what is postoperative cognitive dysfunction, risk factors, outcome, aim of the study. So basically you have 2 sentences for the first point, 2 sentences for the next point, 2 sentences for the outcome, with the linking sentences to the aim of the study. So about 7 sentences. You know, it's always hard to start, especially if you write a first or second review. It's very hard to start. What do I say? How will I combine all the ideas I got from the reading? And if you keep in mind that you only have to write 7 sentences here, and these sentences, they don't have to be very smart or long. They are simple. So what is postoperative cognitive dysfunction? And then the body, so we decided that we're gonna, the body we're gonna make risk factors. What risk factors? Perioperative, intraoperative, postoperative. Then we're gonna discuss diagnostic tools, prevention and treatment. We divided on pharmacological approach, non-pharmacological approach, and the outcome. Which outcome? Short-term, long-term, and then discussion, conclusion, and reference. With this particular work, the journal was very strict because it was the requirement was to search the literature only from January 2018 to June 2018. So it was limited time, and we didn't get much journals. So what do? How can I write diagnostic tools where I have to be stuck in a particular time frame? So there were no studies published in this time frame. So you need to sort of juggle around and put it into discussion, because in discussion you can put the tools. And then, so it makes a bit of a trick here. So when I wrote this plan, because I was the head of the group, so when I wrote this plan, I sent it to my colleagues, so other authors who are going to share. We decided that I'm going to do the introduction, discussion, and conclusion. Other author is going to do the risk factors and diagnostic tool, and the other author is going to do prevention and treatment. So at the end, this is how we sort of, we set the time limit. So we say 2 weeks. We're going to do the research and write a very draft. So here's the definition, and we got, I deliberately left it this way, so it was just a screenshot so you can see the work going on. So my part was definition and incidence. So I write postoperative cognitive dysfunction includes a variety of clinical figures that ranges into terms, onset, and blah blah blah. So this is my draft, and I put the reference here. Always put the reference. Whatever you do, keep it in the like that, put it in a list straight away, use the technical help like special programs to do the reference. Anyway, but always write the reference. And then I didn't find like postoperative cognitive delirium to be completed. So I'll go back, I'll complete it later if I don't have time for it now. Writing was easy. All you need to do is paraphrase. This is my team. So when you got the plan, when you got the draft ideas, the draft sentences, then you need to go precise from paper to paper, the most favorite ones, so the ones you're gonna actually put into your paper. And by saying favorite, it's not that you like it, but you know that it's a reliable source of information. They are in English, and they are in the reviews or trials, so they have a good evidence level. And again, make a reference list of them, and then read through that paper again. Highlight what you want to put into your review, what you want to say to your colleagues, so what you want other people to know about this problem. Because the point of us doing the review is to share the information. I don't want to go through 10 papers that are irrelevant. I want to have a look at 3 which are reliable ones, which have a good level of evidence. So here's the paraphrasing how it works. So this is the first column here is an introduction from the other review that I did. And here's the introduction for the last review. So if you see, they're not copy-paste, they're completely different text, but I didn't have to make everything from scratch. So if you change 4 words in the sentences, if you sort of put the sentences from back to front, it's already a different text. And we had 1 to 3, so we have 3 references for here. Here is just 1. With I just wanted to make a point with citing yourself. Personally, I don't want to cite myself, but yes, if you have a paper like guidelines, you want to cite it because you want other people to know that there are guidelines on this topic. So, because your readers could be professors, your readers could be students, your readers could be those who are looking for a reliable information. They don't want to know something about this topic. They want to know precise information. So, guidelines are good to cite again and again. Then you are in the discussion and conclusion section. For me, discussion is always a bit hard because you need to sort of say again and again what you already written in your paper. And because you're doing a review, you have to paraphrase it again. But you also sort of need to sum it all up because you don't want to write again the long paragraphs. You need to keep it again 7 sentences. And it has to have introduction, as Federica said, just again your aim of the study, your results of the study, then the body, so how did you do your study, and then the conclusion, and the conclusion again. So I don't know if it makes sense, but so it's about the 7 sentences. In conclusion, your final message. Both sections don't have references. So it's your creation, what you've written, what you're saying, and what is your message. References, check the format. Reference style, the most popular reference style is Harvard style. Use technical support, EndNote, and Mendeley. Check spelling, punctuation, format, duplications. It's very annoying. You spend 2 months on reviewing papers. You're already tired of this. You just want to send it away as fast as you can. You have other things. You have job. You have and now you have to check your references. Do it. The technical support is your friend. And when you think it's all finished, send it to your co-writers, send it to your head of the group, make changes, again, make changes, repeat the steps, and remember, writing is a team job, so don't be afraid to ask for help, for advice. Say, I don't know what to write, I'm out of the time, please help. Because we should share our information, we should stay motivated in writing. So, yeah, don't forget to ask for help. Thank you and good luck. Questions?
Excellent work. Very serious. Okay, we are about to finish. I mean, I have 2 more presentations, but we have to go. I spent all my time. I think that the issue of self-citing, finish the message.
Ah, no, it's not a message,
Is a no.
yes, the name for
Bogostina.
oh, yeah.
You can try to me and it does it to you. I think that the issue of self-citing came out again. I think that Riccardo, although was not aware of your question and on the issue, made the point very clearly, when he said that you have to write a protocol sometimes, especially when you need funds. And when you write the protocol, you want that those that eventually funds you knows that you are doing one. Otherwise, nobody will put the money on you. Understand? So you have to figure out a balance. At the same time, you don't have to cite yourself if the citation is not appropriate, because then we recognize, he's trying to bullshit us, so you're not going to make the money. Consider that I've been recipient of a few NIH grants in the United States for a few $1 million, not me personally, but me and the group I've been working with. They do it very seriously, this work. And so you have to understand if you qualify, if you have the authority to step into the process, because there are many people that want this money and want to say, I am the one. So citing means to locate yourself in the field. You have to know where you are. You have to know so well the literature that you know where you are. Understand? It's like fighting in a field. You have to know where you are. You cannot say in the wrong place. So it's important, the self-positioning.
Cite the good references.
Yeah.
If they are yours,
But,
no.
but if it's not appropriate, then it's not appropriate, period. But if you know how good you are, you have to say that. If it's not appropriate, you better don't mention. We are about to go. I hope this has been of interest. It's been a long afternoon. Please, if there are questions, if you will have a proposal, if you have doubt, if you have whatever, I'm here to serve you. I'm here to help those that are interested. The first step is to write. Learn something, make a question, write 1 sentence. This is the beginning. Then will be the second question, the third question, or the third sentence, and 1 sentence after the other. When you write 2 sentences every day, at the end of the month, you have the paper done. Another information that I think is important, for those that are new, absolute beginners, we have been able to write a paper in 3 months with Anastasia after some running. But if you start today and you write me every 2 weeks, and we keep moving and moving, it takes 18 months. You have to know the time limit. 1 hour working with me or with someone else, 3 hours working by yourself every week, and keep in touch every 10 days to 15 days. This way, every study goes to an end. 4 hours a week for 18 months, you have your paper done. Good work. Ciao. Спасибо большое.